This week, Bob Erdman, Associate Director of Development at Core Security, joins us for an interview to talk about building a risk-based vulnerability management program. Next up, Jim Langevin, U.S. Congressman at the U.S. House of Representatives, joins us for a discussion on Biden administration's EO on cyber. In the security news, Pingback is back. Was ever really gone? Damn QNAP ransomware, anti-porn software, Qualcomm vulnerabilities, spreading pandas on Discord, the always popular Chinese APTs, exploits you should be concerned about, job expectations, we steal your cryptocurrency, quick and dirty Python without lists, new Spectre attacks, GitHub says don't post evil malware, and more. All that and more on this episode of Paul's Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly. Cybercriminals are using social engineering loaded with urgency and fear to successfully prey on victims, your employees, or your customers. Protect your Office 365 email from today's most sophisticated attacks with Barracuda Email Threat Scanner. It's a free tool to help protect your business from these hard-to-detect attacks. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner uses artificial intelligence to hunt and eliminate Office 365 email threats. Find the cybersecurity threats hiding in your Office 365 email right now. Get your free email threat scan at securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man whose clapback is a pingback, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Welcome, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It's episode 693, recorded on May 6th, 2021, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island. To my left, Mr. Larry Pesce is here with us.
Yes, that I am.
Welcome, Larry. What's going on?
It's good to be here. We'll see how I feel next week. We have our second Pfizer dose.
Oh, your second Fauci ouchie.
My second Fauci ouchie, and on Wednesday at like 5:30 at night.
Yeah.
So I think Thursday is going to be a little hurting. But
right, yeah. You don't get much of a choice on the times, but, you know, I'm not complaining.
Yeah,
you deal with it.
I mean, we had some choice in the time. It was originally supposed to be Monday, but we had to drive an hour.
Yeah.
Hour there and an hour back for Pfizer. But we found in the meantime that a ton of appointments opened up significantly closer.
Right.
You're right down here in Johnston.
No, nice.
Which is way closer to us than an hour. And they had 1,800 appointments.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we got to pick the time, which just happened to be after work and after kids' activities. And yeah, we were already going to be out to do stuff. So
good stuff. Dr. Doug White is with us remotely for the first time.
The first time ever I was remote. I've always been in the studio, so I had to be remote. I got my second Pfizer yesterday, and I had all those dreams about Bill Gates licking my eyebrows and all that kind of stuff. And but I'm okay now. I had a little bit of a headache, so but I feel like empowered. But it may be one of those bitten by a radioactive ladybug or something kind of thing.
That's just the 5G routing table starting to form.
Is that what it is?
Yep.
Yeah, it's starting.
Bill and Melinda are getting divorced. Did you guys hear that?
I saw that.
The Queen is now a widow. Bill's divorced. Just saying. It's just that's a power couple right there.
I know. I was having those kind of thoughts earlier today about, like, you know, Bill is now available, and maybe I should give him a call because, you know, now's the time.
Yeah, I think he wants to hear from you, Doug.
I mean, I hear he can hook you up with a free TechNet subscription.
Mr.
And
Lee
all the
Neely.
Windows NT you can use.
That's it. Mr. Lee Neely's here with us. Lee, welcome.
Good to be here. Not running any NT in this house, but, you know, probably other places. Looking for some fun. You know, hey, we got a nice, beautiful weather out here. I hope you're having nice weather back there. We're in the mid 80s right now.
Oh, that's some serious warm weather. Yeah, we're not that quite warm here, but we're just getting warmed up here tonight on the show. Security Weekly listeners save $100 on their RSA Conference Pass for 2021. It is an all-access pass. RSA Conference will be fully virtual experience from May 17th through the 20th this year, of course. Security Weekly will be live streaming Monday through Thursday in Virtual Broadcast Alley, interviewing some of the top sponsors and speakers for the event. To register, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC 2021. and use the code 5U1Cyber. We hope to virtually see you there.
Drink.
This segment is sponsored by Core Security. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/core security. Bob Erdman has more than 25 years of experience in information technology. He has worked with global customers across government, healthcare, finance, and military to help implement mission-critical technology. He joins us today to talk about building a risk-based vulnerability management program. Bob, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Great to be here. Excited to talk.
Yes, it's nice to have you back on the show. Have you been on this show before, right, Bob? Is that true?
Not on this one. I've been on the short one, the wrap up.
Yeah, okay. I gotcha. Awesome. Well, welcome to Paul Security Weekly. Bob, how did I just want to delve a little bit into kind of how you got your start in information security.
I got in the hard way or easy way, I guess. So I was running QA, and we sold a big deal to the military. QA guy, go to the lab, make it pass, and make them happy. So I got introduced to security in the DoD running STIGs, and just kind of fell into it from there. Kept working with the government, major medical centers, financial institutions, and more over the years, I just kind of became a security program guy. So I started managing security products, offensive and defensive side, and now I feel old, having started on the way back machine Unix, but it's great to still be around in the industry.
Fantastic. And now, Core Security has a very special relationship with the show, but it's part of a much like Security Weekly is part of a conglomerate of companies. Core Security is also part of now a conglomerate of companies.
It is. Core Security is part of Help Systems. That is our parent. So besides Core Security, Cobalt Strike, Digital Defense, Go Anywhere, Automate, File Catalyst, GlobalScape. The list changes almost every day.
It's quite the list of
leaps and bounds.
Yeah, it's quite the list of. Is it RPA, robotic process automation, is a big part of your portfolio? That was interesting.
That is, yes. Automate and Jams, their sister company, both are big in the RPA space. So that is a great way for us to be able to introduce new capabilities, of course, because we have our own in-house automation teams. Whenever we want to do things like that, we can pull in the things we already know. Yeah,
it's pretty cool. And recently you picked up Digital Defense Vulnerability Scanning Company, and previous to that, Cobalt Strike, who many of us knew and used in the industry.
We did. And in between those, File Catalyst, Bolden James, and Titus, all in the data security and high-speed over-the-wire transfers with File Catalyst. So it's a really interesting mix that we have.
Yeah, that's really, yeah. I was impressed with the portfolio. I'm like, wow, there's some of the things I hadn't even to be honest with you, I hadn't heard of before, which is why I wanted to describe some of that for our listeners. So that's really cool. Today we're talking about a risk-based vulnerability management program, which seems to be like this catchphrase. This sounds like, you should have a risk-based vulnerability management program, but it's not necessarily an easy thing to accomplish.
No, it's really not. There's a lot of different things that you need to do as you're working your way from, the baseline where we find a lot of people, which is either no scanning or ad hoc scanning, moving forward to where you are working in a more, better methods. You're doing more active scanning. You're starting to patch your high vulnerabilities to really start to incorporate the contextual risk around that to the business. What in my environment is the highest priority for me to patch, because we can't walk out and have 1,000 vulnerabilities every week and expect our teams are actually going to get any of those closed. We know it doesn't happen. Things stay open for a really long time. So beginning to look at what is the most risky to our business, where do we need to concentrate first, allows us to be much more effective in our patch programs and bring down that risk overall to the company over time. As we look at cyber insurance, cost of our breaches, and all the different things around that.
What are the most common factors that you found, Bob, that people are using to classify risk, kind of right or wrong or indifferent?
Most commonly, we see people just basically going off of the CVSS score. So I'm going to just try and hit my 10s, maybe hit my 9s.
Yeah.
And then it's already next month, and I'm going to go back and hit my 10s again, depending on what's coming up. That's not always necessarily, the number one factor you have to worry about. as we start to look at the business context around the systems, maybe what the compliance ramifications around some of our servers are, threat potential. So, we're not just starting with, a little over 120,000 vulnerabilities out in the wild today, bringing it down to what's discoverable inside of our environments. What are we actually finding that you have? That brings us down to a much smaller subset. And then what really are the critical and high risk things within that group? And then, honestly, what's actively being exploited? Because the biggest things we need to worry about are high risk systems that have vulnerabilities that are actively being exploited. That really helps us shrink that window down of what we want to concentrate on, patch that bad stuff first, and then let us expand out from there and move along.
I find it fascinating that still, I guess because we sit here up on a pulpit and we're like, everyone should look at all these different factors and prioritize that way. I find it fascinating that still people just fall back to the CVSS score, which doesn't tell the whole story, right?
It doesn't, but it's easy. It's a single list to look at. I'm just going to go grab the numbers, and work that way. It's a lot harder to get the rest of this around it. Sometimes it takes multiple tools, and really having a way to not only get my list, which is the first big challenge, and we actually see more than we'd like to. How many assets do I even have on the network? The first contact, and we say, how big is your systems though? Let's help you scale. We don't really know. How about you run a scan and tell me what you saw? That's the first problem with just discovering what people have, what came in from shadow IT, what got plugged in yesterday that hasn't really been brought into the inventory systems yet. And then moving on after we discover vulnerabilities to actually be out and test those and see which ones are exploitable, which ones can we reach, which ones can an attacker go ahead and poke a hole in. And then, do we hit a brick wall or do we hit the soft, creamy filling of the network? We want to prioritize based on the risk to those systems first.
I feel like so much of that can be automated today, right? Because I feel like when we first started the show and prior to that, it really was more of a human craft to be able to identify vulnerabilities, know which ones were most exploitable, know where to find the exploits and to go exploit it. I think you fast forward to today, and much of that can be largely automated. It's interesting you have businesses in products in the automation space as well, but automated with kind of like that human touch in the process.
You're right. Automated with the human touch to make sure that nothing too dangerous is going to happen, and it really goes around to the appetite for the business for their risk. I mean, we've dealt with companies in the past where if it isn't broken, I don't want to fix it. Leave it alone. Let it be. Others where we had really good inventories, really good baselines. We check for patches every day. And, we evaluated the risk and the SLAs and the downtime possibilities with fallback. And it was riskier to leave unpatched vulnerabilities in those systems than it was to just patch them and accept that occasionally we might run into a problem. So as we go through and do our vulnerability scanning, we bring in contextual threat operations and what's going on around the wild internet. We have threat research teams and dedicated vulnerability researchers that are looking outside what's happening there. And then we can pull in the automated pen testing behind that and actually turn around and try and pivot on those vulnerabilities and show which ones can be exploited, increase that risk score for the ones that can and be able to actually show the business, if I broke through this is where I can get, this is what it might cost you, when somebody steals that database in the background, and help to bring that up forward and move that down the process.
And so the vulnerability scanning component recently came from the digital defense acquisition. Is that correct?
It did. It's about 8 weeks ago, actually. It's really fairly new. So we're super excited to have that. That's been we've partnered for a long time with a lot of the other vendors. Everybody knows the big three, lots of them underneath, web app scanners as well. And now having that capability in-house allows us to have an even tighter integration and do a lot more around this to bring that automation forward. So we really can bring vulnerability management to the masses, essentially. It doesn't matter how big your team is. You may be 200 people, you may be 2 people. We can still support the same methodologies, give you the same kind of capabilities, and just make it easy for you to use that at the scale that you need it.
And so, because I worked in vulnerability management, the digital defense, they developed their own scanner from the ground up?
They did. They built their own scanner from the ground up. They actually built their own fingerprinting as well. So they're using their own fingerprinting probes and their own methods around that. And then we They have a threat intelligence pipeline. We brought along a very big one as well with Core Security, our threat intelligence pipeline. And it allows us to put a lot more context around the different things and understanding what's going on and what types of threat actors are working with which vulnerabilities in the area. So that lets us bring that context to the data so we can really help you score those. And then we've also made it very easy for people to add their own risk scores. That was one thing that Digital Defense saw early on. I want to be able to mark the important systems to me and bring those higher up in the ranks. So it's not just that System A has a CVS 10. System A is very important to me, and I want that to bump up above System B so I can help use that inside of my prioritization as well. I
like that, and I haven't tested the product yet, but we do some of that here at Cyber Risk Alliance, actually. And vulnerability scanning is up next. Sneak preview. It's what Adrian and I and team are working on. And the fingerprints are one thing that Adrian and I both kind of like to really get up on our soapbox about, because there are a lot of solutions that we see that incorrectly fingerprint things that are very easy to fingerprint. Ubiquity Gear is an example. We've got some software that we test. We haven't even done the test yet. This is just like stuff we're running across. They're like, won't identify it as Ubiquity. And we're like, dude, like really? Like you could probably just pull the MAC address and get that it's Ubiquity. And so obviously the fingerprinting was a huge part of you guys acquired the company. I'm assuming they have their own research teams that are doing a better job than most from what I've seen in doing that fingerprinting, because it's important.
They do have a very large research team in doing that, and we're super excited. Inside of our penetration testing tools, Core Impact, we also have fingerprinting capabilities, and we do it differently. And it's great to be able to merge the two methods together, take the best of both sides, and make sure that we're all working on the best data that we can. Very similar with our attack path mapping. We have an attack path map inside of our pen test tools. DDI also has a attack path mapping inside of the vuln scanners. So, if somebody pops System A, what's behind it? What can I see? And as we marry these things together, we're really able to get that economy of scale, show the same types of data in different contexts, be it vuln scanning, pen testing, or just plain old network mapping that we also have that can do its own fingerprinting. So we've got a lot of experience around this now, and we've really gotten very good at it.
I'd imagine, Bob, that you're the next logical question, I think probably on my mind and many others, is you're going to marry these two tools together so that I can vuln scan and it goes, hey, there's a vulnerability, and it goes off to Core Impact or, Core suite of tools and goes, I'm going to go exploit that, and I'm going to include the full thing right in the report, right?
Absolutely. That is where we're working on right now. And not only from the vulnerability scanner side, but what if I'm the guy running the pen tests? I want to poke the button and have Frontline go out and give me everything it can about that system as part of my information gathering so that I can import that in as part of my testing. So making that real tight two-way integration is going to help us a lot with being more effective on both areas as we move forward. And then bringing in all of our threat research and their extra data as well helps us put that context around it and really understand how something could be utilized maliciously inside of the network.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy. I always loved the Core Impact Agent. I thought one of the best payloads, probably still today, that I've seen. I think it's really cool.
Does it still have the voice?
Alex's voice?
Yes.
It still does. It's still the same one.
It's awesome.
And we need another recording, though, because now, of course, we interoperate with Cobalt Strike, so we can drop beacons from Impact agents. We can session pass from Cobalt Strike beacons down into Impact and drop agents out of the beacons. So we're really starting to build a lot of that interoperability between all of the tools in the suite.
Nice. Lee, you had a question?
So as I was thinking about the whole, I was back thinking about CVSS and everything you've got in here. And I remember going through the adding the context to the CVSS 3 scores, and it was kind of a bitch. And I'm wondering, can you characterize with the tools you're bringing to the table, are people actually using the risk scoring to modify the scoring, and they're not just going, the shift. Can you characterize?
I like that. I want to just build on that for 1 second, Bob, and the question is that I do the vuln scan, I exploit the vulnerability, I deploy the core impact agent, I collect all that data, and then I come back and I modify my risk score, my CVSS score, based on that telemetry that I've collected. Ooh, I like that.
Absolutely. And even before that, some of the scanners are actually modifying it just because Core Impact has an active exploit.
Right.
So the first step is we could exploit it. And then, of course, the next step is we did, and here's all the information that we gathered. And as people are exposing that, I mean, I think one of the big things that we saw was, moving to CVS3 was a lot of things went high and critical. It's a much bigger pool than it used to be. And that's where we really get to add those extra pieces. We do see a lot of people using the personalized risk scoring. So I want to move up the threats on my DB service higher than the threats on my web service, for example. We also have peer grouping available. So as they're working over time, now I can go out and compare myself to as like industries, as like sizes of companies, and see how I'm doing in that industry peer group. If I am falling behind, if I'm leading the pack, and help me know if I'm doing enough to really work with those items that I should be.
Does all that stuff start to get into, when we used to do controls, we used to rank them like low, medium, high risk on controls, and then start trying to kind of build out some sort of analytics, and it went from very simple things where people just basically said, high risk things we're going to fix, low risk things we're going to accept. But I mean, I was always trying to push people towards more of an algorithm based idea where you do some statistical analysis and you start looking over time at how these different factors affect risk and loss and so forth. I mean, is that where we're going?
I think that it is, and we're in that path already. We're building machine learning models around these different things to help predict that risk score and to help make a better decision tree for those end users. As we're working with those high, medium, lows, we're also keeping what we call their security GPA. So essentially they got a report card growing or shrinking over time inside of their environment. So I can look today at where I stand based upon the systems in my environment. I can go back last month and look, am I going up? Am I going down? Create my diff reports, show management what we've done in the last 30 days, for example, to fix vulnerabilities as we move forward. So high risk vulnerability on a low impact system is not going to score necessarily as big as a medium vulnerability might on a very high risk system. And of course, it's going to affect our scores overall as we work that way. So we really do want to help them prioritize much better where they put their efforts as they move into that farther down the line into the management model.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of naive when I first started looking at that stuff because I was kind of like, fix all this. And, and that was when I got sort of hit back with, we can't afford to, we don't have the time to. And it was like, wow. And that was really when I started thinking about how do I take all these spreadsheets and pivot tables and start saying, which one of these should I circle first? Because I had somebody, a CIO say, tell me the top three. And I was like, they're all important. And he was like, yeah, but what are the top three? We'll fix those. And, it was like, So, yeah, I think that getting into more advanced analytics that can show you these things, especially as they shift over time, as you put other things into the system, as you add controls, and trying to get a feel for how all that stuff interacts would really be valuable.
It definitely is, and that's a good question for people to ask themselves. Do you know what your top 50 vulnerabilities are in your environment, or even your top 10, like you said? A lot of people really don't. They haven't done the time to figure out what are the crown jewels of their environment. If I am a malicious actor, what am I going after? How do I get there? How do I protect the systems in that attack path to keep that piece of my network safe and make sure that those are things that I'm prioritizing every patch cycle, making sure that those are the systems I'm looking at first, and those highly vulnerable systems, the ones that have the most important data, are always getting protected. And you can't always do it with active patches. We all know you can't always reboot. You can't always apply a patch without breaking some application that somebody wrote. Sometimes it has to be a remediation step, maybe a virtual patch, or I'm going to put a mitigation strategy in place. I think one of the important things with that is generally we want to have some kind of a time limit upon that. So this, mitigation is great, but give me the schedule of when you're actually going to apply the recommended patch so that we can take the mitigation away now and show that we are fully patched at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I got to where, it turned into sort of a multivariate problem because and which meant that it got out of everybody's hands real fast. was that on the dependent variable side, the initial one that we looked at was loss. So it was like, did you experience losses related to this? But then that turned into downtime. So there was also that one. And there was a whole bunch of other dependent variables. And all that turned into a really complex algorithm really fast. And, and then you started losing them because they really want you to come in and say, if you've put that patch on this, all your troubles will be solved. And that it was usually not that simple. Although
Bob,
sometimes it.
I wanted to ask a question about exploits too. And because I think there's some nuanced things in there that I've learned, especially in the past year, about how to manage vulnerabilities. And that is, it's one thing for an exploit to exist or not. It's another thing to measure whether or not that exploit is being seen in the wild. Does your threat intelligence also kind of add that second piece of like whether it's in the wild or not?
It does. We're definitely looking at threat actors, threat actor groups, and what is out there in the wild. And I think also along with that is, can it actually be exploited in my environment?
Yes.
Not all exploits are equal. Some of them have very specific requirements. Just because the exploit exists, you also have to have A, B, and C configured exactly the right way to have that exploit.
Like in some of the exim vulnerabilities, right? It's like you have to have like 22 gigs of memory.
Exactly 22 gigs.
Exactly 22 gigs, yeah.
So when you're looking at exploits in the wild, are you differentiating between, say, just a proof of concept that's been published versus something that's actually being used, or are those same weighted?
No, the things that are actually being used definitely bump up, but how much they're being used, who they're being used by, of course, but proof of concept always starts the chain. Since we have our own pen test teams, our own pen testing software, we of course have our own exploit writing team that does this every day. So we get a lot of good intelligence from them on what works, what doesn't work, as well as coming back in from our pen test teams, be it a 0 day that we're reporting or just something that, got published by a research team. So we really get a lot of that. How effective is this information from those pen test teams? Can you actually use this if you go hit somebody's corporate environment? Is this kind of pie in the sky that you never see it? Because honestly, most of the things we see getting exploited already have a patch. It's not 0 days. It's not the crazy things that are coming off the researchers. The majority of it is something that had a patch that didn't get applied, or it had a misconfiguration on the system that opened a hole. And that's really what we're trying to find is, what are those things that you could have fixed already that you didn't? And how can we help you figure out which ones are the most important to get there first? So, not just patches, but configuration as well. Be it, if you're going SCAP, if you're going CIS, if you're going STIG, we just want to make sure that we're providing the right kind of information for you, the business that you're trying to run.
Yeah, I think with the difference between a proof of concept and an actual exploit is whether or not the exploit team can put it in core impact, right?
They love POCs because that's the first step. That just makes their job easier.
Yeah.
And they don't have to write the POC.
Right. And if they can get it working, then it's in the framework, and then it automatically, I think, has a higher risk score.
Yeah, and I think the other thing we see is people don't always consider the non-operating system vulnerabilities and exploits. Not everything is a Windows bug or a Linux bug.
Yeah.
It may be a VPN. It may be something in your browser. You mentioned XM. It may be something in the firmware on the back of your UPS. It's really hard to know. There's so many different places you need to look. So everything is important now. IoT, containers, operating systems, applications. And that really gets back into that discovery phase right from the start. What is actually in my network that I need to be concerned about, so that I can make sure that I'm looking at that across the environment and what's being used the most. If I have an environment where 3 people are using something and 1,000 people are using something else, most likely the 1,000 are the one I want to look at first, because that has a bigger attack surface for someone to go after.
Yeah. Bob, you and I were having that conversation, and we've had it here on the show as well, is usage, right? How much usage, not just usage, but like the number of instances of this software in my environment. And then if you can track how many people are using it, right, there's ways to gather that telemetry. And then who's using it are all those little like nuanced things that go into how I prioritize what I'm going to fix first.
Yeah, and if people aren't using it, why is it there? That's one of the things that we have tried to do a lot of. If I don't need a service, I don't need a port, I don't need a package, get rid of it, because it decreases the amount of things you have to patch. If if I didn't need that RPM, I can get it off my system. I don't have to ever worry about patching it again because it doesn't exist to me anymore. And the more and more we can limit that attack surface, the easier it is for us to actually maintain a good level of patching inside of these programs.
Mm. Yeah, there's something to be said, I think, in security about, controlling your attack surface and environment. And that stems from knowing what you have. Because you have to know about it before you can go, wait a minute, I want to standardize on this. Maybe that's not the most secure thing, or, there's a lot of factors in there. But, look, this is what we're going to standardize, and this is what we're going to get good at discovering, finding, fixing, maintaining, and configuring correctly. I think that's really where it's at when it comes to security.
There is something to be said for that. If it is not able to be managed in the way that I want to manage it, generally, our IT team doesn't want it on the network.
Yeah.
Even if it's not maybe everybody's favorite app, it's an app we can securely manage. That's the app we want to use.
You got to pick your poison, It's essentially what it comes down to. I mean, we look at that with communication software, and we look at that with browsers, for sure. I mean, you got Skype, Zoom, Slack, Teams, all these different things. I mean, they all come with some inherent level of risk, and you could analyze that risk, I think, until the cows came home. But pick one and get good at deploying, installing, configuring, and managing and patching that one. That's it.
Yeah, build that baseline gold disk, increase what's on it if you need to for certain environments, but always try and live with that base image first, and that'll really help you limit what's out there. And maybe you have to build enclaves inside of your environment. We certainly see that where certain groups of users need certain capabilities that others don't. You can lock down some areas more than you can lock down others, for example, because my exploit writers, they're writing code that is meant to do exploits, and all of the vendors are trying to find that code. So we have to do different rules as we're developing things maybe over here than we would in our standard software development area, where we can be much more judicious about what we go after. So we are building different models for different areas, and you can do that within the products, and configure those systems to work in the way that you need to across your environments.
Yeah. Also, Bob, I want to talk about web application scanning too, because I think, I'm starting to really draw some very distinct differences between the tools and tactics and techniques kind of on the flip side, on the Defender side, that you use on software that you're writing yourself versus software that you're kind of pulling off the shelf. Now, oftentimes software you write yourself, I mean, almost 100% of the time is including someone else's modules, but you're adding on your own code to that, and you control the development process. Versus code such as, I use WordPress as an example. I'm taking that off the shelf. Sure, I'm adding plugins and all that stuff on, but that's something I'm not really developing myself, right? Custom React application to me is very different from a security perspective than WordPress. And I like using the automated scanners, especially in as much automation as I can on the things I'm not writing myself. Because the stuff I write myself, I can build stuff at all these different stages in the application lifecycle. But for WordPress, I want a scanner. And Digital Defense has web application functionality. Is that correct? Core Impact does as well.
Yes, both of them do actually. Digital Defense has a web application scanner. Core Impact, the pen test tool, has its own web application scanner. We can combine the data from both of them as we're working through these different environments. But more and more, that's what we're seeing people targeting with their actual scans, is actually starting to look at those web applications, and maybe even from the vendors that they've chosen. You of course want to do a little research on the vendor you're bringing in. Do we trust their SDLC? Are they doing something good? And of course, trust but verify. Then let's actually test that after we deploy it, and see if it really meets the security standards we want in our environment. So we really like having that in there, having the capabilities to do authenticated and unauthenticated scans, so we can reach in a little deeper for the places that we need to, and being able to really utilize all of these tools in the tool chain to get the most valuable data that we can for the environments. And then especially on the retest, and we haven't really talked about that very much, but it's not just applying a patch and knowing that you applied it, at least you think you did. You're not really sure how effective it is unless you actually go and check it. And that's where the pen testing piece comes in, is we can actually go out and one touch validate that all of that work that you just did last month is actually effective. The patches were applied and they're actually blocking the holes that we saw in the network, so that we can know that we can move on. Because if we didn't, we need to go back and do something. Either old artifacts were left on, external things were there, systems didn't get rebooted sometimes, or maybe the patch just failed to apply. So we want to make sure that we're not only patching in our patch cycle, we want to come back on the other side behind that and test those patches and make sure that we've actually remediated the vulnerabilities.
Not only that, one situation we run into here often at Security Weekly for compatibility reasons is I had to uninstall the new version and I had to put the old version back because stuff didn't work. Right? And if you're not doing this continuous assessment, you're going to miss that. And there's windows where you're vulnerable. Now, there may be a very good reason why that happened. In our case, we need to do production because we're going live in like 5 minutes. And so if it doesn't work, like we're screwed. Therefore, we've got to revert back to a previous version. And so you're going to want those compensating controls. And that's why I like the combination of both vulnerability assessment and pen testing. Because, I might have back revved and the vuln scanner still finding it is vulnerable, but I may have added this other thing that makes it so much harder to exploit, right?
Oh, for sure. We want to do defense in depth all the way around. We've seen that a lot with browsers. Something has been written in-house, and a lot of times this is in-house software that was built, and somebody isn't ready or isn't willing to take the time and the expense to move it forward to the next version. It's like, we are going to mandate old browser version X because that's what works with the thing that we wrote. And if we let you upgrade, everything's going to break and the business doesn't run. So we have to put controls around that to help mitigate that possible damage until those things can be brought forward. We'll see that a lot in the big back-end iron as well. I wrote some big Unix app 5 years ago. Everything's running great, except that it's 5 years old and it's got a lot of security vulnerabilities now. We have to make sure that the business can accept that risk, or else they're going to have to bring forward the time and the materials to move that and make it less vulnerable and get it up to a later operating system now, something that is less risky overall and easier to manage.
I find it amazing that when you do find technology and configure it and build it in such a way that it works, from a security perspective, it's almost a negative because it's working. And I haven't had to look at it and really do anything with it. I have a service running here that I was like, well, I haven't used that in a while. And I hit the website. It's internal, right? I hit it and it worked. And cool. I was like, cool. I'm like, but wait, I haven't updated that container in a really long time. And I'm like, I don't wanna because it's working.
Yeah, containers are getting bigger and bigger, and we're introducing container scanning inside of digital defense now as well. Of course, as people are moving to more of container deployments, we want to make sure that we can get in there and scan containers as we would any other object on the network and make sure that there is not something that is insecure inside of those container images that they're going to start deploying. So bringing that into the pipeline and making sure that they're being treated the same respect that everything else is.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier in the week, Bob, that a container is really just code, right? I mean, it really is not infrastructure as code as we typically think of it, but it's code that's creating that environment. And I think it should be treated as such. Once you take that container and you push it out to Kubernetes or you push out to some other cloud service or your Docker environments, then that's more infrastructure security, right? Because it's all about scaling and spinning up and down. And you really have to keep those two things separate and can treat those containers more like your app and your code. Even if it's someone else's app, you're still you have a file that the Docker file is essentially code that's piecing all that stuff together. That should be treated as code, scanned and analyzed just like you would any other application.
And a lot of times there is somebody else's code involved in that because you're pulling packages down and bringing them into your product or into your service rather than writing it yourself. So we have to make sure that those things are all secure as we bring those along. Yeah.
And so my example was Apache Guacamole, right? Guacamole's awesome, right? I can build a whole config and I can RDP and VNC into everything. I can put it in a web browser. We can access it from anywhere. It's great. And I built that. I didn't really even build the container, right? I basically got the scripts from the Guacamole project, and I'm like, oh, I can spin up a container, and that's how I'm running it. And because it's Java based, right? So I'm like, I didn't want to mess with Java. So I'm like, there's a container. It runs Java, runs Guacamole. It's great, but it runs so well. That's the example. I haven't touched it in a while, and I'm sure a vuln scanner would probably have a field day with it.
We see a lot of set it and forget it. Yeah, you're right, though. If it's working, people kind of forget that it's there in the background until something breaks.
Yep.
It's really tough to touch anything that's working that's in production. I mean, it just even just a patch. You know, I mean, I had just the other day I have this server that's been running since 2005, so it was really really old. It was running Windows 2003 server, and it probably hadn't been patched in 10 years. But I was afraid to patch it because it supported some of my Cisco management stuff that we patched once before, and it fried everything, and we couldn't run it, and we had to roll everything back. So it was one of those, just leave it alone and isolate it. But, you know, it's a huge threat. But fortunately, it was very isolated.
Yep. Now, those are the dusty corners. Someone described that to me as once, right? Like, your job as a pen tester is to find those dusty corners. And that's also those dusty corners are where the good stuff is hiding, right?
We found a server in a firehouse one time it had no monitor, no keyboard, no nothing. It was under a pile of junk in a closet, and we were seeing it on the network, and people were using it to RDP into the network, but we didn't know where it was, and nobody could tell us, and we just had to we literally traced it by wires, and we finally found that, you know, here's a wire that goes to the wall, and there's something, what's on the other side of the wall? And they're like, it's a storage closet. And we went over there and pulled a bunch of old boots and stuff, and guess what? Sat on the floor, server.
And, you know, I mean, as a security person, you want to be like, oh my God, this is an atrocity. But then, like, the technology person, who's like, kind of like, hats off to the person that built that you could put it in a server under a bunch of boots, and like, no, like, that is the greatest technology project ever. Like, someone could just forget about it. Like, you know, our servers were like constantly blowing the dust out of them every once in a while.
And that one had sweaty boot rash.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, but I mean, when you start talking to IT people, when you go out as a security analyst and you start talking to IT people, they get real, you know, pissy about it, because they're like, look, this works, it's in production, don't mess with it. It's you know, and if you start messing with it and it crashes, then you're going to get yelled at a whole lot.
And you know, when you mess with it, it's not going to work right.
Well, and you don't know what it's doing. I mean, the other problem as an auditor was you find those things and you see something pointing to this. So you run a scan and it says, look at this and look at this and look at this. It's really tough to get up to speed on what those things are doing and what services they provide. And often those customers did not know what it was. They're just like, I think that might be where we're getting email. And you're like, you think? You know?
It's like my famous story that, you know, there was a Cray supercomputer at the university, and the only way they knew there was a hacker lurking in the Cray supercomputer is because that person was actually applying patches so that no one could exploit the same holes to get in. Like, had they not applied the patches, it probably would have gone undetected for far longer. But they were applying patches because they're like, I don't want anyone else to get in where I'm in. And it's just, I'm a notice.
I remember, I have talked to people about that before too, saying, you know, if I broke into this server, I think that's exactly what I would do. I'd set up an account for myself, give it some funky name, and then patch the holes so nobody else could get in and kick me out.
Right. But as we know, like, some application, some job probably broke, and it was probably due to a patch that was being installed by the hacker.
Well, there you go.
Bob, are you still having conversations today? Because we have a lot of conversations about when it's the right time for a pen test, when it's the right time for a vulnerability assessment. Now that you've got both those products, you know, in the portfolio, is that conversations you're still having with folks?
It is. We get people coming in and, you know, give me a pen test. I really want one. And we definitely start to ask them, you know, where are you at today? What does your landscape look like? And some of the time we'll find out, you know, what you really need to do is do a vulnerability scan first, because if we're going to bring in our pen test team, they're just going to pawn you right away because you haven't applied any patches in the last year and a half. You know, you really want to fix that low hanging fruit first and make it worth your while to have a vulnerability, you know, to have a pen test done. So run the vuln scan first and understand the difference. And we do see still sometimes people don't really get the difference between I'm checking for missing patches, misconfigurations, versus I'm going in and trying to break into your system. We really want to make sure that they're getting the most out of their pen test. And to do that, they really need to do a vuln scan first. You know, if you're coming in and using the pen test service at Digital Defense, vuln scanning is part of the process. That's what they're using as well to deliver it. But we certainly advocate, you know, making sure that you patch yourself up before you ask for a pen test to make sure you're putting your best foot forward and making our guys earn their keep. You know, because we don't want to just go in and jump on some Windows XP box you forgot is in the closet. We want you to actually make sure things are set right. And then let's look what we really have left over now that we can help expose for you so you can see where you need to go next.
Absolutely. More questions, comments, topics? Bob,
So,
what else? Go ahead, Lee.
So I was thinking is a little bit ago, we were talking about, where we, the 5-year-old application, sophisticated application that we can't just fix. Can we set up something so that we say, okay, we've given them 6 months to take care of this and we'll come back and scan it again? Automated kind of thing, alerts, or other mitigations? What can we do?
No, that's a great function to have, actually. So, especially inside of not only the vulnerability scanner, but more importantly, inside of the pen testing process. So, if we get a scan and do a scan report, we go out and run our pen test, use Core Impact, and see what's there. And you go out and do your fixes. You set up your mitigations, your remediations, and then come back in 90 days. You can just click the retest button, and we'll replay that whole test sequence and then show you what the differences are. Hopefully, they're all really good. Sometimes they're not, but it'll let you do that one-touch automation to validate everything that was done in between those scans so that you can show that difference over time.
So are we coming back and rescanning with the same exact or are we scanning with the latest profile, or can we choose?
Most people, honestly, in the real world are scanning with the latest because they're continually updating and adding additional exploits to the product. We're scanning with the exact same set of vulnerabilities, so nothing's really going to change for us there. We're going to hit the same things that we hit the last time, even though we've updated the product baseline a little bit with new things that could go out. That's not part of that process. We're looking really at doing a one-for-one and showing you the difference.
Yeah.
You, of course, then could go out and poke again, and you should continually reassess your environments over time and make sure that nothing new has been opened up from the last time.
Well, I totally agree with you. I mean, I've had that conversation where it's like, no, I want you to scan me with the exact same profile so that I can show that I fixed the exact fix. And I'm like, but there are new vulnerabilities and new exploits out there, guys. You're going to have to deal with them too. And it's an interesting conversation to have.
And we see people doing it both ways. I mean, they really want to know how they worked from job to job, but then you, of course, like you said, you also need to look at what changed. And sometimes the latest patch actually opened up some new bug that you have to deal with. That's just as important to find out after you've applied that patch. What now can I see on the network?
Bob, are there any new things that you want to talk about in terms of features across, the security products that you're ready to announce tonight?
I think the latest new thing that you're going to see inside of Core Impact when we come out in our June release is that live attack path mapping. So if you are familiar with the tool, it was a very textual-based host map showing what you've done, where your agents are deployed, what you've found. And this new updated version is going to give you a graph view so you can see all of the discovered hosts in your network, the paths between them, where you've moved around, if you've pivoted across the environment, and be able to do live interaction with that as you're working along. So kind of mirroring up the functionality that was in Cobalt Strike with the graphical view that Cobalt Strike had. We're continuing, of course, our interoperability with Cobalt Strike to add some new functionality and features there as we go along. And as we kind of bring our solutions together, we're really working on a single pane of glass for an environment where with Help Systems 1, which is our management plane that we're building, you can get into all of these different data views and different applications running from the same product on there. So that's really going to allow us to give people a single pane of glass to work with, role-based access control for what you're allowed to touch, what you're allowed to see, but it brings it all into a single holistic environment for those end users. The other thing we're working on is adding more machine learning, and we do have active threat researchers and data collection, going every day. We're continually refining our machine learning and AI algorithms, and we're bringing more of that down now into the pen testing space so we can use it to make better decisions inside of the pen testing process of what we try and where we go next to better enable those maybe junior or less skilled users, or just you simply want to walk away for a bit and come back when it's ready for you to do your knowledge work to put even better automation inside of the product than it has today. So continuing to push that forward.
Fantastic. Well, Bob, thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly this evening.
Thank you for having me. It was great to be here.
For folks who want to learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/core security. Coming up next, U.S. Congressman Jim Langevin. Stay tuned.
When it comes to web app and API security, the choice is simple. You can choose Fastly's security solution that teams will actually use in full blocking mode, just like 90% of their customers. Or you can stick with costly options that you probably just turn off. You can get Fastly's all-in-one platform that protects apps everywhere they live, however they're built. Or departments can agree to disagree. You can go to securityweekly.com/Fastly to learn more. Or you can just wish you had.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. If you want to stay in the loop, all things Security Weekly, please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe via your favorite podcast catcher, or to our YouTube channel, sign up for our mailing list, join the Discord server, and follow us on our newest live streaming platform. That's right, we're on Twitch. Also, if you have a specific topic or guest you'd like us to cover on the shows, please visit securityweekly.com/guests. We review those on a regular basis and always want to hear from our audience as to who you'd like to have on our shows. Congressman Jim Langevin is a senior member of the House Armed Services Committee, where he is the chairman of the Subcommittee on Cyber, Innovative Technology, Information Systems, and also serves on subcommittees on sea power and projection forces and strategic forces. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
It's nice to have you here. I want to thank you for your services and all you've done to promote cybersecurity.
Thank you. Thank you. It's become a passion over the more than a decade or so that I've been doing this. We made some progress. I'd like to see more, but it's a work in progress.
Congressman, what drew you to specifically cybersecurity?
Well, I kind of fell into it. I'm not. I don't necessarily have a technical background. I'm more of a policy wonk, and I was chairing a subcommittee on the Homeland Security Committee that had jurisdiction over cyber. The name of it was Emerging Threats, Cybersecurity, and Science and Technology. So I really thought that most of the time we would be looking at chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats to the country. And it wasn't until my staff director came to me one afternoon telling me that I really needed to get a classified briefing from these two scientists from Idaho National Labs that found a significant cyber vulnerability that could cause physical damage. That's when kind of the alarm bells went off. And I got the brief, and I saw what was now known as the Aurora threat that showed how inserting some malware into the generator's logic control system.
Did you brief with Mike? Was Mike one of the folks you briefed with?
What's that?
Was Mike one of the folks you briefed with?
Mike Asante,
yeah.
And who sadly not long ago passed away, and it's a great loss to the world. He was a great guy and really a knowledgeable researcher, and I was lucky that our paths crossed, and he was the one that helped put me on this path. But it really it awoken me and showed me how, again, physical damage could be done through a cyber attack. But then we did a deeper dive to see how prepared we were, and found that we were really not prepared at all, and that there was a lot of work that needed to be done to better protect the country in cyberspace. And it's been a work in progress ever since. And several projects that I've been involved with have been extremely meaningful, impactful, including most recently the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, where I was one of 14 commissioners, one of 4 members of Congress that were on the commission that we helped to create, and met for about a year, and then issued our report with 80 recommendations. 55 of those were turned into legislative proposals, and we were able to successfully get 5 of those, 27 proposals through the National Defense Authorization Act were enacted into law, and are making significant progress toward better protecting us in cyberspace, including creating the first ever national cyber director, which I've been trying to do for more than a decade now, and it's finally got it across the finish line just at the end of last year.
Fantastic. With the recent attacks, especially on the Florida water system, of course, we cover industrial control systems attacks all the time. Do some of the new legislation specifically address industrial control system cybersecurity here in the U.S.?
So that's what we're hoping a new executive order will do coming down the pike. I would say that it will allow for CISA to be more proactive, and that the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency to be more proactive. But they're obviously the point agency dealing with private sector. And this is the challenge, right? That, where most of the damage can be done. This is what I found in my work more than a decade ago on the Homeland Security Committee, was that most of the damage will be done in critical infrastructure, chemical, in our electric grid, maybe our financial system, or telecommunications system, water, sewage treatment plants. But that's mainly owned and operated by the private sector, and government really doesn't have a whole lot of control per se over those entities. And so, although CISA has broad authorities and in terms of protecting the .gov network, it's going to be a partnership between government and the private sector to better protect us in cyberspace, including dealing with industrial control systems. What the change in the law we were able to get through in this last Congress was to be able to create a joint cyber planning office at CISA, which will help to anticipate these types of problems, and then within, say, industrial control systems, and then work more closely to address those. It also clarifies roles between the sector risk management agencies and CISA. So the left hand knows what the right hand is doing, and we have kind of closing the gap between who's doing what.
Is it? Do you believe there's legislation that could help improve? I hate to have legislation dictate things, but this is our critical infrastructure here in the U.S. Do you believe there's legislation that could be passed to allow them to could be compliant with certain regulations?
Well, sure, and that's part where you're getting with the sector risk management agencies come in. Sometimes they have regulatory authority. Others in other areas, it may take legislation needing to be passed that will impose more requirements to make the industrial control systems more secure.
Lee.
So you mentioned that the operators are private companies; they're not government entities, which is cool. But how are they with the idea of getting CISA involved and partnering? And are they on board? Are they resistant? I wouldn't say they'd be looking for more regulation. Nobody is, but it could really work well.
They want that partnership with the government, as government wants the partnership with the private sector. In fact, one of the commissioners was on the Cyberspace OM Commission is Tom Fanning. The commission is still, by the way, in force. We got an extension on our work, but Tom Fanning, who's the chairman and CEO of Southern Company, was incredibly just invaluable as a resource to Solarium and putting forth industry's perspective. And one of the things that he was very passionate about and helped to shape one of our findings is a recommendation to create what's called a joint collaborative environment. So there's basically would create a new social contract between government and the private sector to allow more robust information sharing and intelligence sharing, so that basically Intel world has more insight into the threats that private sector critical infrastructure is facing, and critical infrastructure would get more real-time intelligence information to know where the threats are coming from or what the challenges they're facing. Right now we're basically passing emails back and forth in terms of intel sharing. Tom Fanning points out that we need something that's much more robust. So we almost got that recommendation through in this last Congress. It's going to be one of the things I'll be working on in this Congress to create this, again, joint collaborative environment. It'll create a new social contract where government is going to have to share more robust intelligence information with private sector critical infrastructure. But private sector is also going to have to give more information to the government in terms of things like incident response, data breaches, and things of that nature.
What do you think the biggest challenge on that is, aside from getting the legislation through? Once we're going to execute, where's our big, where's the sell job got to be to get everybody on board?
I think that most entities are there. It's going to be sort of a paradigm change for the intelligence community, and that they're going to be working more closely with cleared entities in private sector critical infrastructure. So, the Intel world it's always they deal in the realm of highly classified information. So it's versus need to share, and in this case, we're going to have the the intelligence community sharing more real-time information with private sector critical infrastructure. But I believe that we're going to get there. It's going to be this new social contract that will create this environment that will allow this more robust information sharing, better going back and forth, and it's to everyone's benefit.
Do you think that starts to push down like they did with law enforcement after 9/11? They started putting up fusion centers and things like that were focused real heavily on sort of kinetic stuff. But do you think there could be more push to support those entities at local levels with information, with incident response, and all these kind of things from federal?
Yeah, that's right, and that's the idea that we're going to anticipate and identify problems before they actually happen. If the intelligence community may be looking at something that to them maybe looks innocuous, or they wouldn't necessarily understand the impact of it, but if someone in the critical infrastructure saw that same information, would say, wow, that's a real problem. If they were to attack this particular node or this particular entity, it would have a broader impact. It's not just maybe a one-off, but could be something that's affecting critical infrastructure more broadly. So that's why that info sharing is just so important. So it's really the CISA is the future for CISA is to, of course, be in the field. That's where they want to make sure that that CISA is getting not necessarily just out of Washington, but really into the across the country to be in working more closely with entities across the cities and towns, and again more broadly in the country on these things.
Congressman, how, I guess for the benefit of our audience, how was CISA created, and exactly what is its mission today?
What is what?
CISA.
Yeah, so the CISA is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency within the Department of Homeland Security. That's the primary agency that is responsible for protecting the .gov network. But it's also the primary entity is the point agency that deals with the private sector. So again, government doesn't control the .com world or isn't responsible for per se defending it. It's a partner. They will be the entity that, say, private sector critical infrastructure would go to, either the Sector Risk Management Agency or to CISA in particular if there's a problem. And CISA then can call on either its own capabilities or they have reached back to other areas of the federal government that would offer defense support to civil authorities and could call in, say, resources from U.S. Cyber Command or NSA if they needed additional backup and support. The one challenge is right now that CISA needs to grow its own inherent capabilities. Right now, they're relying too heavily on defense support to civil authorities, but CISA needs to really develop its own expertise, and they can be a more effective resource to the private sector that way.
Yeah, I found it really interesting with CISA in its ability to bring in those other agencies to protect things such as the election, and really bring together all those different areas of expertise to protect our infrastructure.
That's right. And so that's a great example of how CISA was working with the private sector or with local governments and states, municipalities to better secure our elections. And I think Chris Krebs did an outstanding job in that role, and he brought all the tools to bear that could be brought to bear to protect the critical infrastructure will of our election systems. And as a result, as he said, we had the most secure elections in U.S. history. So, but that's a great example of CISA working with either local state governments or with the private sector to achieve a goal of stronger cybersecurity.
Lee?
So, I mean, I just was thinking, CISA's been really kicking butt and taking names, if you prefer, if you will forgive the analogy, on partnerships. They've really done an outstanding job, and I'm wondering if you see that any trouble with that moving forward. And the other part thing I was thinking about at the same time is we got these relationships we're building. We're going to be working between CISA and private operators. Is there going to be any funding available for the private operators to implement cyber defenses? Because some of them are on a really tight budget.
Yeah, so I certainly would like to create grant programs where it's appropriate, where CISA could be, more effective in working with private sector, or especially states and municipalities could take advantage of federal resources. One of the things I'm trying to do is create a fund for IT modernization for states and municipalities to take advantage of. We tried it in a couple attempts in the COVID aid bills that we put through, that we wanted to put through funds for private sector critical infrastructure, and we weren't able to do as much as I would like. But if you look at states and municipalities, they've unfortunately got antiquated IT infrastructure, hard to defend, hard to upgrade, and we need to see that infrastructure modernized and incentivize moving data to the cloud. So we let the cloud service providers do what they do best. Let them worry about the security and the housing the data, if you will, and that way states aren't trying to defend against nation-state attacks, if you will, or the hackers that might come in and try to disrupt their operations. It's best if we can leave the security to the experts, and that way states can do what they do best, and that's providing services to their constituents.
I agree, and I just read an independent report, and it was a per capita analysis of data that Kansas and Rhode Island were among the two highest states in terms of unemployment fraud that occurred, especially during times of COVID. And you have these states, Congressman, they're trying to solve the same problem. And having, I think, federal assistance to allow them to do that securely is really one of the right approaches to all of this, right? All states are trying to do the same thing. They all have to process unemployment claims, for example. That's right.
And that's why we wanted to create this IT modernization fund. That's one of the findings in the Solarium Commission, that they wanted to create the National Cybersecurity Assistance Fund, and that would also help other areas of local and state government and even private sector hopefully tap into that fund for IT modernization and stronger cybersecurity.
Doug, I know you had more questions for the Congressman.
Yeah. So I think in those same lights, I mean, the biggest threats, I think, to a lot of these things come from without. They cross borders. They go all over the world. I was wondering, are we working to try to develop more cooperation with other countries so that we can prosecute people, we can get people who are doing things that are not within our jurisdiction? I mean, I've seen some of these things with Europol and things like that, and I just wondered how we're sort of refocusing on that.
Yes, so we are working with partners and allies, and we need to continue to do that because it's not just a U.S. problem or challenge; it's an international challenge or problem for us, and we're stronger together. If we try to do this in silos, we're already going to be extremely stressed and challenged to try to do this on our own. We need to work with partners and allies. That's one of the reasons why having a State Department lead, it's one of the findings of the Solarium Commission, was to create a ambassador level position with a bureau underneath that individual to support international diplomacy and cyber, and working closely with international partners on the law enforcement side to identify those entities that are violating norms of behavior, that are conducting criminal activity, and that's incredibly important that we leverage all assets of national power to go after those entities that are trying to cause us harm. So, the perfect example is the sanctions that were put on Russia just recently, and they were identified in SolarWinds, and as the entity that was carried out one of the worst cyber intrusions in U.S. history, and as a result, they were sanctioned for it. So we need to make sure that we're working with our partners and allies so that they will join with us when we and help using all source intelligence to identify bad actors in cyberspace, but then also work with us to impose costs.
Congressman, I find it interesting when I look back in history. So my research projects go back into the early roots of hacking, and I even remember early in my career, we worked with Secret Service largely on computer crimes, and they were responsible in the late 80s, early 90s for some of the investigations. It strikes me that today that pretty much every law enforcement arm of the federal government and even to the state level has a cybersecurity function. Is that true?
That's true. And it depends whether it might be Secret Service, might be FBI. I know in Rhode Island we have the Rhode Island State Police, the Joint Cyber Task Force here in Rhode Island State Police. They have an entity there. On the international front, by the way, getting back to your other point, we just heard testimony yesterday about the cyber assistant legal attaches that are the eyes and ears of the FBI in country overseas. So there's so many entities now that are involved on the law enforcement side that are trying to go after cyber criminals, and it's a continued work in progress as it evolves, and no shortage of challenges.
Congressman, what can we do as experts in cybersecurity to help any law enforcement agency? For those of us listening, especially. Yeah.
So first of all, I think it's so important that we reach out to the cybersecurity researcher community and accept the help that so many people want to offer. I've been out now to DEF CON a couple of times, and always impressed, obviously, with the size of the conference. But I learned early on that there's a lot of good people that just want the internet to work right. They just want someone to listen, and so there's any number of ways that people can get involved. I was a big fan, of course, in the early days of the Hack the Pentagon program that Ash Carter put together. Now we have other areas of government that are there's the Hack the Capitol event that just went on. I just spoke to that recently. There's a whole number of ways that cybersecurity researchers can get involved and helping to basically both protect the ecosystem but protect our country.
Do you think Congress is starting to catch up? I know the first few times I talked with you quite a while ago, I at least felt like that the Congress was not, with some exceptions like yourself, there was not a lot of movement forward with the government on understanding these kind of problems, and it was very esoteric to them. Do you think we've reached that tipping point where now we're starting to see people really understand, they get it, they're starting to say this is very important, we need to do something?
Yes, it's changed a lot since I first got involved in this issue back in 2007 or 2008. I kind of got a lot of funny looks when I talked about the threats of cybersecurity to the country, and people just didn't get it. But now they do, and it's there's a number of things that I've been working on over the years, but unfortunately, the reason why people are so aware of the problem now is because of the high-profile cyber attacks or intrusions that have occurred, including people getting their the PII caught up in some of these cyber intrusions that have stolen personal and private information, or the damage that it's done to our economy because of the theft of intellectual property. So more and more people are aware of the problem. I don't necessarily know that everybody gets what to do about it. and that's something that where people are learning more and more about. But I try to remind everyone that there is no silver bullet. We're never going to get to a day where we're 100% cyber secure. What we can do, though, is we can buy down our risk to something that is much more manageable than it is today. Starts with good cyber hygiene, of course. So many of the problems in cybersecurity could be avoided if people didn't click on the malicious links, or they had the strong passwords. They use two-factor authentication and those types of things. So we just have to get to a place where we're educating people, starting at the very youngest ages. The Israelis are great at this. It's really it's immersed in their whole system from K through 12 education about cybersecurity. We need to do that same thing here in the United States.
Congressman, are there discussions happening about international regulations about, for lack of a better term, cyber weapons? In other words, I could develop an exploit. I can sell that basically to whoever I want, enemy nation state or not. Are there discussions happening today on how to regulate cyber weapons similar to how we regulate other types of weapons?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I haven't really heard it put that way, but it's going to be hard to do that. I don't know that I have an easy answer for it right now, but especially when you have it's something that's dual use technology or dual use program, it can be very difficult. What I will say is that, and that's one of the findings of the Cyberspace Solarium Commission, that we need to make sure that we're changing the calculus now, or the dynamic of the rush to be first to market as opposed to be secure to market. So for example, the liability on final goods assemblers, by way of example, that we have to have more accountability in my view, and that's one of the findings of the Solarium Commission. We need to have a list of what's in a product, if you will, so that we know where vulnerabilities might exist. So, but I would say it's going to be an ongoing discussion to see what is appropriate for regulation, what might be appropriate for legislation, and then what's right for collaboration with private sector. And I prefer to go down the road of collaboration rather than necessarily always imposing requirements.
Larry?
So the concept of the cyber weapon, wanted to sort of ask your thoughts, your opinion on some government agencies such as the FBI and some others recently, with that Quoddy fingers hacking back, some entity hacking us or attempting to hack us, so we go in and hack them because they are vulnerable. What are your thoughts on some of those types of activities?
So I don't support hacking back absent government involvement, and I don't support private entities, if that's the question, going in and hacking back. Although it's tempting, and I'm sure there's lots of people that would like to say, well, we'll show you. We think your cyber tools are strong, ours are stronger, but you don't know what unintended consequences that may set off a cascade of reactions that you can't control. And in a country like North Korea or Iran, for example, if there's a hackback that took place from the private sector, they're not going to distinguish between it coming from the private sector or that government was behind it. They're just going to know that somebody from the United States attacked them, and they're going to assume that it probably came from the government. So if there's going to be a hackback situation, it really needs to be the government that does the hacking back, so that we're ready for the blowback and can use all tools of national power to protect us from that. But I will say, if you're talking about the action that the FBI recently took with respect to hacking back against unpatched servers, if that's your question.
Yes, sir.
The FBI conducted a seizure pursuant to a warrant. And as you know, lots of people were affected by web shells that had created because they didn't patch. It doesn't seem to have caused significant harm, but it was an innovative way, or a different way that FBI has acted that they had in the past, and it helped to neutralize the threat. Going forward, I think we have to figure out, is that the role of the FBI, or is that something that, say, Department of Homeland Security could carry out?
I think the important point there, Congressman, is acting underneath a warrant, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that in the private sector example you gave, you're not acting under a warrant, right? And I think that's a major differentiator.
That's right. It is.
Do you see more of that kind of thing going forward? I thought that was a very interesting story when I saw. I thought it was innovative. I thought it was a good use of resources to try and fix and patch some of these servers sort of by force, since nobody would do it. Do you think that's going to be more of a thing that you see the FBI or CISA or whomever going out and doing?
It might be, and certainly it might even be better or more effective for the ISPs to do it. But I would certainly like to see us being more proactive at closing all vulnerabilities. And by the way, I will say that we have the vulnerabilities equity process in the government, and that's really important because that's where they weigh what needs to be disclosed and patched, and what they may not for national security purposes may hold back on. Now, there's always the lean toward disclosure, and I've been on that for a while, and I'm impressed by the way the vulnerabilities equity process works. It's a balance, but I think it's a good process that's put in place. But I guess I'll just pause there.
Okay. Do you see on those same lines? Do you see then like a shift away from kinetic warfare funding, maybe off into virtual warfare? I mean, even if they're not hacking back, they have to kind of be ready to do that, because I think there's going to be more of that going forward, where these attacks are not necessarily going to be kinetic. There will be a need for that.
Yeah. So. There's always going to be that balance, and I would say that we need to do several things, and that's one of the findings of the Solarium Commission. I should mention, by the way, that our strategy that we came up with was one of basically 3 parts: shape behavior, deny benefits, and impose costs. Those are the 3 major principles of our final report. And so, in some ways, we're going to develop tools that where we would impose costs, but we also need to work hard to deny benefits if the bad guys do get in. This challenge is not going to go away anytime soon, and we need to figure out get a better strategy for protecting the country in cyberspace. We do it by working with our partners, using international norms, shape, and behavior. Assume that the bad guys per se are going to get in, but we want to limit their ability to do damage, and we do that by denying benefits. Think of the OPM hack that occurred. There's an entity. Obviously, they didn't understand, that organization didn't understand the value of the data they were charged with protecting. And they were trying to defend old antiquated IT system, antiquated IT system, and the data wasn't encrypted, so it got stolen, and presumably China took a treasure trove of information. Had that information been encrypted, it would have been rendered for the most part useless. And then we have to get understand the issue of imposing costs. That's why. It's not just say about cyber on cyber. And by the way, I should say that we are going to see more of this gray zone conflict going on, right? That is just below the threshold of armed conflict. And so we need to understand that, be prepared for it, and figure out how to deal with it. And we do that by pushing back in some ways, again, denying benefits, but certainly times we'll be imposing costs. But it's not, we don't think of it just, we don't have to think about it just in terms of cyber on cyber. We can use all assets of national power to respond and impose costs, whether it's sanctions, indictments, law enforcement actions, or again, working with our partners on the international front to impose costs.
It sounds like, Congressman, that defense is really a key part of the strategy for our nation, ensuring that our infrastructure, our software and hardware is more secure that we use here in the U.S. To that end, what are your thoughts on IoT or industrial IoT devices and either regulation, legislation on when you bring a product to market, it has to meet a minimum standard of security for home routers, cameras, and all of these different devices that are being produced at a rapid rate?
And specifically, Paul, I was just looking that up, the IoT Cybersecurity Improvement Act of 2020.
Yes.
So,
yeah. And so, as I said earlier, I think there is too much right now of a rush to market as opposed to secure to market. And we really need to change that dynamic. So that's why, having liability there for final goods assemblers, you think of it in terms of, someone sells you a car, there's liability there. Now, by the way, when I say that, there's liability, it doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be a patch if there's a vulnerability. It just means that somebody has to weigh the equities there, and could it cause damage? Could it cause significant harm if the vulnerability was exploited? And somebody has to take responsibility for that. So that's really important. So and also the other thing that we're trying to do is making sure that we're using the purchasing power of the government as a market driver for more security. You won't be able to sell to the government, for example, if it's not more secure. That's the hope is that those standards will also apply more broadly to the private sector.
Larry, sorry, did you have a follow-up?
I'm hoping that's the case, and Paul, we've talked, and the other guests, the other hosts rather, have talked about this a lot. That this may be the time that we need to see lots more legislation to help make this go further and be stronger about what we're seeing for the security for IoT. We think about that that risk metric for the automobile manufacturers, and we go back to the movie Fight Club, where the automobile manufacturers find an issue with the car, and how much is it going to cost to fix versus what does it cost to pay out all of those folks that could potentially be hurt. But we think about what the cost of an IoT device is, and usually they're pretty inexpensive. And compared to what it takes the development time to fix a problem versus what the potential damage could be. And the potential damage is staggering, even for something quite small. So I'm hoping that we see more of this.
I think that's a great segue, Larry, into supply chain security, which came under great scrutiny after the SolarWinds breach. Congressman, was there an executive order? What was the action by the federal government in response to that?
Yeah, so there were sanctions on Russia as a result, and there may be more coming down the pike. We have the ability to respond at a time and place of our choosing, but going forward, entities should be on notice that we're not going to sit idly by, and if you're going to engage in malicious action against us, that there are also consequences.
Mm. Are there also concerns about most of the hardware that we use coming from China, and that being part of the supply chain? I know that's a topic we talk a lot about here on the show, is that we do import a lot of the computer hardware.
Yeah. So, and that's just it. Supply chain security is a big deal, something that I'm paying a lot of attention to on my subcommittee on the Armed Services Committee. We are, dependent on a lot of components that are made outside the United States, and security is always going to be a challenge. For those, exquisite systems, certain types of chips, for example, we need to make sure that we make them ourselves, whether it's the government or the private sector where we order it from. In other cases, we have to make sure that where we're getting our critical supplies, that we know where it's coming from, and we know it's secure. So that's what it's going to be a top priority going forward. So
one of the go ahead, Doug.
Is that so? In that, I've seen this SBOM, software bill of materials stuff being sort of tossed about. Do you think that that's viable? That we can require products? I know that they were starting to require it for federal, but is that? I mean, you think that's viable to require? I would like to see it, but I don't know if it'll work.
I do. I think that first of all, we can require it. And it's starting to move in that direction. In some ways, the DoD does it, and we're going to be doing it more broadly in government. But that the software, the bill of materials to know what's in the software, it's going to have to at least be known, so that we know if there's a problem, we know where to look and how to address it. And I hope that spills over into benefiting the private sector as well.
Was that an executive order? Was that where that came from, that requirement? I remember I did a news story about it, but I'm trying to remember how it was coming out.
Well, I know that NTIA is doing great work, and they're proving it out right now.
Yeah,
but it's probably going to be coming out in the executive order right now.
Yeah, I think it just hadn't maybe gotten place yet, but there was a news story about that the other day. It was a response to SolarWinds that they wanted this software bill of materials, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, we're hoping that's going to be in the executive order. I'm hearing that we'll have something to that effect in there.
Congressman, one of the other issues that I think we face as a nation is increasing our cybersecurity talent. What efforts are you aware of going on now to increase the cybersecurity talent here in the U.S.?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. We need more people going into the cybersecurity field. I applaud and appreciate the work that Doug is doing on the academic side. We also have the Cyber Core program, and that was one of the findings of the Sullivan Commission, that we wanted to grow the Cyber Core program significantly. I know many of you are familiar with it, but it's Cyber Core is a scholarship for service program. You can be accepted as a junior and senior in college, and your tuition will be paid for your junior and senior year. You get a stipend of $22,500, and when you graduate, you go into some type of government cybersecurity work at the local, state, or federal level for a period of 2 years to help pay back your scholarship for service that you were accepted into. And so government can't just compete for more cyber talent to grow its share of the piece of the pie. We need to grow the whole pie itself, so it benefits both government and the private sector. So again, big shout out to Doug White for what he's doing. He's been a pioneer here in educating the next generation in cybersecurity, and we need to continue to grow that effort, including, by the way, educating kids at the youngest levels, K through 12, as I mentioned earlier. So both instilling cybersecurity awareness, but also doing things like teaching coding and secure coding at very young ages, and so that all this is kind of baked in from when they're very young.
Agreed. Doug, did you have more questions, topics?
The only other question I was kind of in a different light, but I know there's a lot of pressure to roll out broadband to everyone, because I think if we don't do that, people are going to be left behind. I don't really it's very tough for me to even conceptualize how people's kids and whatever do things in school if they don't have access to some kind of broadband. But I was wondering, are we doing things as we talk about that to also push cyber hygiene, cyber knowledge down to the same people who are getting this broadband so that they don't become the next generation of victims of all this fraud and crime that's going on?
Well, we need to do more of that, of course. And now on the broadband side, very pleased that the president's Americans Jobs Plan is going to put money into broadband, so more IT infrastructure. But it really has to be part of an IT infrastructure package going forth, and cyber needs to be a primary concern for any future government spending.
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of calls from people, police officers, towns, and things, just saying, we don't know what to do. We got people calling us, our constituents are calling us. So it's sort of, I'm glad they're rolling out broadband, but it also creates a whole new avenue of problems for with people being exposed to this stuff.
Yeah. The other thing I'll mention too is that we also, going back to security of industrial control systems, we need to make sure that we're properly training the installers on a lot of the equipment as well. I know it's a little bit unrelated to what we were just talking about, but I wanted to mention that, something I meant to mention earlier, that not only do we need to have stronger security for operational control systems, but we also need to make sure that the operators that are installing this stuff are well versed in security. Just in the way that an electrician is steeped in safety training right from the get-go. If you don't, you touch the wrong hot wire and you're dead. Well, we need to make sure that we're also steeping security in mind for those installers as well.
Oh.
I completely agree.
So we, between the Congressman and Dr. Doug, we've kind of got Rhode Island nailed. How do we get the other 49?
Well, it's I've got some great partners, first of all, in cybersecurity, and I was very pleased years ago when I first got into this to start the Cybersecurity Caucus with my colleague and friend Mike McCall, a Republican colleague from Texas. I got Congressman Mike Gallagher, who I serve with on the Armed Services Committee, and he and I serve on the Solarium Commission together. He was one of the co-chairs, along with Angus King, our two great co-chairs. Dutch Ruppersberger from the great state of Maryland. He's on the Appropriations Committee. He's got NSA in his district, and he's another cyber warrior and champion. And so the list is growing, but it's a work in progress. I would like to eventually see, and it's one of the findings of the Solarium Commission, that we create a cybersecurity committee, a select committee on cybersecurity in Congress. That way you get members that really develop the expertise, and you streamline, the jurisdictional fights or issues that you have. Because right now there's some 80 different committees and subcommittees that have jurisdiction over cybersecurity in some way, shape, or form. It's just too many. You can't do proper oversight that way. So eventually, I think we're going to need a select committee on cybersecurity. It's just too big. And so, we need to let members know that cybersecurity is a big deal in every congressional district in the country. That's another area. So, when you asked earlier, what can the cybersecurity researcher community do? What can people that are interested in this topic do? Get to know your members and their staff, and you can serve as a resource to them. Never underestimate the amazing talent that you have, that the government also needs, just in terms of education awareness. And not every member is going to care about cybersecurity, but you can help the member and their staff to understand the challenges, or be a resource to answer the tough questions for them.
So, following on, any tough nuts to crack that are frustrating that we haven't asked you about? Well,
there's never a shortage of issues and things that we could talk about. I was very proud of the work that we did on Solarium. 80 recommendations. And the fact that we got 27 of them of the 55 legislative proposals through in Congress is just great. And the one thing that that had been missing this whole time, again, for 10 years, I've been raising the awareness on this, that we didn't have a quarterback on the field. And we know it was the point person for the government really pulling all this together. We had the closest we had is the cybersecurity advisor in the White House, but didn't have any policy or budgetary authority. We needed someone that had a position as the bite, if you will, that has the authorities to compel departments and agencies to close their vulnerabilities and do more in cybersecurity. We now finally have that person. The last year, the National Defense Authorization Act, one of the proposals we were able to get through is creating a Senate-confirmed National Cyber Director. And I want to give a big shout out to Chris Everett, National Cyber Director, to be nominated. He's awaiting confirmation right now. Chris was my pick for cyber, the first ever cyber director. He's a thought leader on cybersecurity, former deputy director of the NSA. And so I'm excited about the talent that he's going to bring to this new administration. Big shout out to President Biden too. He really gets this. He's doing more on cyber. I was just with Vice President Kamala Harris yesterday. She was in Rhode Island, and she and I had a side chat. And I said, I understand that you're going to be taking the point on cybersecurity, and she said yes. She's been working on it for years and years now, back to when she was Attorney General in California. And so we pledged to work together. Her in California, and so we pledged to work together. Her office has already reached out to my office, and we're going to get some things going. But we're and also the administration created the Ann Neuberger's position, the Deputy National Security Advisor for Cyber. So, and you got Jen Easterly, who's going to be the new director of CISA. So we're getting the right people in place with the right authorities, and now we're just going to continue to keep the oars moving in the right direction. But we're getting there. I'm excited about the future for better protecting the country in cyberspace. I'm always honored to do my part.
Congressman, thank you so much for all of your work, especially that in cyber. It's near and dear to our hearts here in the show and our listeners. So thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Thanks so much. Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And next up is the security news. Make sure you stay tuned.
Keeping up with security issues across thousands of web assets without the right approach to web application security is a daunting task. Get ahead with web vulnerability scanning automation from NetSparker, a leader in dynamic and interactive application security testing known for its ease of use and accurate results. Detect a wide range of vulnerabilities in all legacy and modern web applications, address security bugs at scale by automating the confirmation process, automatically prioritize vulnerabilities, and assign actionable tickets to the right developers in their native workflows for rapid remediation. For more information on how to scale application security with ease, visit securityweekly.com/NetSparker. Qualys has brought together vulnerability management and patch management, letting security teams discover vulnerabilities and apply patches immediately, all within a single, unified app. Sign up for a free trial of Qualys VMDR, vulnerability management, detection, and response today at securityweekly.com/Qualys.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. In our next technical training webcast on May 13th, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, see how attackers gain access to endpoints and learn how to use defensive strategies to protect against those attacks. Also on May 27th, we'll have a webcast at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, exploring the latest attacks against DNS and the latest techniques that make it possible to discover and disrupt attacks. That one will be with Adrian and myself, but make sure you visit securityweekly.com/webcast to register today. Also, securityweekly.com/on-demand. You can access our entire archive. We did one today on Nginx security and insecurity with Detectify, and that was awesome. I mean, in the weeds inside of Nginx configuration, complete with demos on how to identify and exploit stuff in Nginx config that I did not know about. And it was just, I mean, you miss one slash in your Nginx config and that can open up attacks. So make sure you check that out. That's on our on-demand channel. Now, on to the security news. Lots of news to talk about this week. Where do you guys want to start? Oh, Larry, you had some really interesting ones.
I had some crazy ones.
Pretty almost all different than mine.
Yeah.
Which I love that we found. Well, you and Doug had one in common, is the Qualcomm bug.
Yep. Yeah, and I hadn't had it. That one was a pretty new one, and it just popped up this morning type of thing, late last night this morning. So I haven't had a chance to dig into it. But it's still a lot of devices in that there is some issues with some Qualcomm chipsets that are used to control the cellular modem. And yeah, you say cellular modem, and you think modem back in the day with Hayes AT command set stuff. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, it's like the same stuff, right?
Yep. And we talked about many years ago Bluetooth vulnerabilities where the serial port was enabled over Bluetooth.
Yeah.
You could connect to it, and then you could issue AT commands and make the cell phone dial numbers without the user intervention.
Yes.
Yep. So similar types of things. Excuse me. However, in this case, with some specific radio packets or TLV packets that could allegedly be buried into other portions of application, processing the type length value packets can lead to memory corruption, aka a buffer overflow that can allow them to run their own code in the radio modem, which can then be used as a pivot to other portions of the device.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. It is typically, I want to say that it says, they say that the TLV packet can be hidden inside radio cellular communications or over the air or multimedia content that when unpacked can reach the vulnerable QMI interface.
So you have to get data on the cellular network to exploit?
So, and that's where I'm kind of confused about this. Like, do we have to inject our own cellular packets into the air?
I haven't looked into that in some time.
And well, it's illegal here in the U.S. It's illegal to research hacking cellular networks, and it's illegal to hack cellular networks here in the U.S. Based on the legislation that I saw coming out of the Clinton administration at the end. I don't know if that has changed, but I think that those rules are pretty lax now. Mm-hmm. But the big one is if you're going to start hacking cellular stuff, you're doing so in regulated frequencies that you don't have permission to transmit in,
Right.
regardless of the type of license you have, unless you are the licensee of those particular frequency ranges, and those are sold to the highest bidder by the FCC to the cellular providers.
Could
So-
you do that like in a Faraday space so that it would be your own setup so it wouldn't actually be in public airwaves? I don't think that
The answer is technically no, because you're not allowed to. But that Faraday cage does limit that environment, so that is typically the way folks get around that. The other one too is that it also depends. These types of issues with you transmitting on these frequencies are. Here in the U.S., they're monitored or they're dealt with by the FCC, and the FCC is a complaint-driven system. They are not listening to see if, oh my God, there's RF signals in that frequency range that it's illegal for them to use coming out of Larry's house. No. If all of a sudden my neighbor's cell phone starts going wonky or their TV starts, getting porn on it when it shouldn't be getting porn, and they report it multiple times.
Again.
Yeah, they report it multiple times, then they will come investigate. So, arguably you see many of these devices like software-defined radio that you're standing up your own cellular networks. I would be led to believe that many of these folks that are standing up their own cellular networks are doing so with these software-defined radios that are very low-power devices. And if you put that at something like my house in the middle of the woods, like the only person you're going to bother because of the effective distance of that radio is me or my family.
And if you put it in a skiff or one of those kind of enclosures, you could probably work on it and it wouldn't bother anyone.
Right, and it would also never come out. So
so you're not going to leak any signals. So, I know that there's people like my dad who would say, it doesn't matter if you get caught or not, it's still illegal. But,
Oh, yeah. And there's so much of our industry that is, it's only illegal if you get caught. And absolutely, this is one of those cases. I don't recommend that anybody go and violate the law, but people are technically violating the law to do these types of things with low power transmission. Absolutely.
Doug, you wouldn't be able to do it in the skiff because transmissions are very highly regulated in a skiff. You'd be breaking two sets of rules.
Really? Even if it belonged to you?
Yeah, I think Doug's talking about building his own.
So there are
skiff.
rules with a skiff.
Yeah, but if it was your skiff, if I owned it and it was in my house.
If it's a certified skiff, it's got transmission requirements to be a skiff.
Okay.
So
Well,
a
the
shipping
point of
so a
isolated
shipping
room.
container.
Yeah.
A metal shipping container with a metal floor, not that
Yeah,
that
so
plywood
just
one,
paint the walls with copper paint and you put it in a shipping container.
Yeah.
There you go. That'll work.
So it's effectively a Faraday cage. Back to
Right.
your comments, Doug. So, admittedly, I've done some testing that is not cellular related, but GPS related, and it's also illegal to transmit on those GPS frequencies. And those are absolutely the ways that I've conducted some of that research within a Faraday cage. So. Also, that said, the radios that we're using for that type of stuff are very, very low power. As an example for low power, one of the testing that I've been doing for the SANS IoT class that I'm working on is a remote power switch, one of those cheap Chinese power switches where you have the little remote that turns that one on and off. And I could capture the signal, no problem, but when I tried to replay it, it just wouldn't turn anything off or on. Because I had to specifically trigger to turn the amplifier on my Hack RF.
Yeah,
Because it was so low power output, it wouldn't travel the 6 feet across to the outlet.
This may be an ignorant question, but since I happen to have somebody who's an expert here, could you run those same protocols over like unregulated frequencies? Just get out completely out of the spectrum, and then you're not breaking any rules, right? It's the same protocol. It's just
absolutely, yeah. So you'd frequency shifting. So a great example of that, Doug, is POXAG pager transmitter stuff. You can capture POXAG pager transmitters. You can transmit in the frequencies that are licensed for those POXAG pager transmitters. But I wanted to do so legally. I'm using those same protocols over 2 meter ham radio bands with my software-defined radio. I am transmitting legally in an area as a ham radio operator, which I am legally allowed to do so because I'm identifying my transmissions with my call sign. And I have some very specifically crafted pagers that I ordered from China. They were about $55 a piece because I had them crystalled specifically to listen in on a frequency in the 2 meter.
I was going to say, you'd have to change the hardware
yes,
to be able to transmit and or receive, in this case as a pager, receive on that frequency.
On frequencies that I was allowed to transmit on. Absolutely. And certainly, you could re-implement any of these protocols over one of the ISM bands, 433, 900, 368, 433, 900, 2.45 gigahertz.
Did you order this from AliExpress? Do you order from there?
I do.
I placed my first order from there. It felt kind of weird. Or it's kind of weird.
Did AliExpress, Deal Extreme, less so anymore, but AliExpress, based on the stuff that I've been buying, I've been a lot of stuff from AliExpress.
Ironically enough, my parts for my dirt bike, I had to order from my fork protectors, like plastic fork protectors.
Dude,
here in the U.S., they were like $55 for a pair,
and you know where
they're just pieces of plastic.
And you know where they're made.
And they're made in China.
They're made in China. And that's this coming from the same factory that after their shift is over, the plant is shut down and they run a couple thousand units for the.
And they sell them for $16 a pair on AliExpress. I'm like, these are just pieces of plastic. Like, I just don't want dirt in my forks. Like, really?
Yep.
Because I cracked one. Like, it happens.
Yeah. And even still with the AliExpress stuff, we're getting way off topic, but you will find knockoff electronics, specifically open source ones. They work.
Some of the time, they're so cheap. You order a few. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even at these, we're still talking $150, $200, which is still cheaper. It was like half price than the original open source project ones. These are definitely some of the ones that ordering two doesn't necessarily work out for you. I have very much done that. I'm like, I'm going to order this cheap $12 Android tablet from China. What are the chances the first one is going to suck and it's going to be broken and arrive? So I order 5 of them for $60.
Right.
And you know what happens?
A couple are broken.
No, all of them work.
Oh, there you go.
So I'm like, now what the hell do I do with these 5 tablets? I really only wanted one. So that's my problem. So short answer to a long response, Doug. Yes, you can absolutely quote frequency shift to some of the stuff. You just need to have the appropriate equipment that can both send and receive it. It's protocol over a different frequency range, and absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, if you're not testing the signal, then it doesn't really matter. You could almost send it over a wire, even if you're just trying to figure out how the packets work together. It wouldn't matter as long as there's some medium from one side to the other.
Yep, absolutely.
SBR for the win.
Yep. The challenge becomes with some of these devices that you're looking to do. Like my example, I actually went and found a distributor in China that could custom crystal these radios so that they would receive in specific frequency ranges, and I paid for it. Normally these things were like $12. But they were able to, put custom crystals in for a significant expense, as it were, compared. They were $55 by the time we were done, and as opposed to $12. But if you wanted to test cellular stuff, I haven't done a lot of digging into it. But where do you get a commodity cell phone that you can change the frequency ranges on to be able to, like, hey, I want this to be able to do 2.4 gigahertz on my cellular so I can interact with it legally.
I think you'd have to get like a hardware emulator or something that was just emulating the cell phone, like a development tool. So yeah, I don't think you can do that.
My understanding is, and the interesting one is that you start talking about stuff like OpenLTE, OpenBTS, and some of those, that there were folks that were standing these up in ISM bands, and they had phones that would work on them that they could effectively change them. And I haven't done any looking into that in some time. So there are devices that you can change the reception frequencies, reception and transmit frequencies on, but they're few and far between.
It should be possible theoretically, because it works just like any other radio. So obviously somehow you can set the frequency. It might be very expensive and difficult, but you should be able to do it.
Yep. Some of them are, it was software based. And in the case of mine, it was you actually had to physically change the hardware to do so.
I had a hardware thing in there about a Raspberry Pi Zero password thief.
Oh.
So pull credentials from a locked computer. It runs Responder. So they're obviously, they says they're commercial products. USB Armory and of course the Land Turtle are 2 examples that do this. They say they cost a bit more than a Pi Zero and a USB board. These were out of stock you can buy the whole kit as one on Amazon, but they're out of stock. But I think for something that, might be a throwaway kind of thing, perhaps.
A Pi Zero is about $10.
Yeah.
If you get it with Wi-Fi, yeah.
Yep. Well, the even better, the Pico is what, $3, but
Something like that.
they're very similar to, like, you're programming that with the Arduino IDE. Yeah. Okay. So,
My story number 6.
The USB add-on board. Yep. I've seen Jim McMurray use some of these. Lee, some of the projects that you and Lee were working on with him about some of the hacking labs and stuff.
Yeah, we were actually trying to build a pen test device using a Pi Zero.
Yep.
Running. Now I can't remember the name, but it was basically Kali for a Raspberry Pi. The only problem we learned is you're running the attack and the targets on the same Raspberry Pi. There was a little bit more that it can handle.
Yeah, on the Pi Zero, about Pi Zero W or Pi Zero, yeah, I can see that.
But it was cool.
Yes. Yep.
It was. I've got a couple around here. I was actually thinking about, Paul, you and I both had several stories featuring Python.
Yes.
The one that caught my attention this week is that there was my numbers 10 story for one of the exchange exploits that the NSA released. There is a Python-based proof of concept that exploits it. Now, I realize that in order to exploit it, you have to have a non-patched server with an authenticated session, but hey, putting out a POC in Python is pretty freaking cool, no matter how you look at it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's you'd be surprised how deep you can get with Python, and especially creating network. I mean, you've ever done that stuff in C. When I look at the Python exploits that are putting packets on the wire, I'm like, that looks like really familiar. Like, it looks like the way you do it in C, and it kind of ties into my story. Also, how Python, there are disadvantages to using Python lists. One, that you can mix types, and the other is performance. And they advocated for using Python has a built-in module called array that you can use arrays just like you would in C or C++, and makes the case that because it's the arrays in Python are type specific and they are a lot more performant. I thought that was interesting.
Ooh.
Speaking of hardware in Python, Paul, you should totally check out CircuitPython or MicroPython. In that, so Adafruit has some stuff. I've got an extra one. Maybe I should bring it to you. Little lighty up things. I think maybe something to play with the kids with.
Yeah.
You plug it in, and it shows up as a USB drive. And you take a Python app or a Python code .py, and you drag it over to the USB thumb drive, and you unplug it, and it runs that Python code.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
Yeah. Like, let's make lighty flashes. Like,
Hardware Python interpreter.
Exactly. Neat stuff.
Where's Joff when you need him?
I know, right?
And
Here we are having this Python discussion without Joff.
Like, so the Raspberry Pi Pico, it's, you think Raspberry Pi versus Arduino, microcontroller versus full functioning system. The Raspberry Pi Pico runs CircuitPython or MicroPython. It's a $3 thing that you can plug in and runs your Python.
It's awesome.
It's cool stuff.
Python also had a vulnerability in a standard library called IP address, very similar to the NetMask vulnerabilities as well, which I believe has been fixed. It's a very similar kind of thing, like zero padding in the IP address.
All right. Doug, what's this thing spread by Discord? Panda? What the hell?
It's called Panda, and it was. I mean, it's nothing really. I guess I was just mentioning it because so many people use Discord.
Like us?
It's yeah. I mean, and it's one of those things that most people aren't going to get hit with because it's something you have to actually run. So, but it was like people were jumping on all these chats, I guess, and spreading this stuff. Basically, there was an attachment that was being shared via some kind of an Excel spreadsheet in there, and they were pushing it out. And
they called it a booby-trapped Excel file.
Yeah, it's a booby-trapped Excel file. And but I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, in terms of it being something really dramatic, it wasn't like a dramatic hack, but it was just something people ought to be aware of because this is old school stuff from bulletin board systems, but it works just well right now, and it's available. So I guess you could go get it. It's called Collector Stealer. You can grab it, and once you grab it, you can customize it and then turn it loose so that people will run on that. And it grabs data off your system and sends it up the command server. So, I mean, it's really just another standard framework kind of attack, but I was interested that people were spreading it across Discord.
Did people spread a lot of malware on bulletin board systems, Doug?
No.
I thought that was an old dig at Doug, but like,
it was.
Dude, come on now.
It was.
Come on now. We're of the same oldness at that point.
Star Trek.exe. Come on.
I was never big into the BBS things.
Oh.
Yeah.
What?
Well,
I wasn't.
What?
Really?
I missed that boat. I know.
Get out.
I had an Apple IIe.
No, get out.
My parents wouldn't
No,
let
get
me.
out.
Really?
My parents wouldn't let me get a modem.
What the hell, dude?
'Cause we watched War Games, and my parents were like, "No, you're not getting a modem.
Get out.
You will cause global thermonuclear war.
were you
You're not
feeling
getting a
oppressed?
modem."
Well, all right. So maybe they saved you from yourself for a little while.
Right,
yeah.
Get out. I'm kidding.
For a little while.
for a little while,
And then you built a server farm in your mom's dining room.
and then then I did get a dial-up modem, and we were actually in Rhode Island. We were one of the first communities to get broadband in the late '90s. It was late '90s. I had broadband. Yeah,
That's like hand crank broadband,
it
right?
was. It was awesome.
Somebody had to get on the bicycle and pedal while you were doing the broadband to
Right.
keep the packets moving.
I had my own servers that would get hacked. That's when I would spread malware amongst all of us.
Ooh,
that had
look, a Star
broadband.
Trek game.
Yeah,
Hey, what? You played Trade Wars 2002 as well?
Yeah, there you go.
See? Huh?
Yeah.
Exactly.
we're in the point of one of my books I'm reading about early days hacking. Steve Jackson Games.
Oh, yes.
You guys remember that story? That was
Yep.
like it was a game company.
Cyberpunk GURPS.
Yeah,
Steve
Cyberpunk
Jackson,
GURPS. Yes.
Yep.
That was it.
Yep.
Wow.
So that was sort of towards the beginning of the explosion of the cyberpunk era with Steve Gibson, William Gibson, and
William Gibson. Yeah.
William Gibson and
Hoot Gibson. Did you say Hoot Gibson?
yeah, Hoot, yeah, he's a hoot. And Shadowrun, the set of novels and D&D or D&D style RPGs. Yeah, dude, like this is like the nostalgia
How about
episode now.
Payback?
And for every game that was out there was a file on a bulletin board that said how to beat fill in name of game here.
Yep, and it was an EXE.
Oh, of course, yeah.
All right, Lee said a good one.
Ping back.
Oh wait, before we get to ping back,
Go
I want
ahead,
to talk
go
about a quick because we talked about cryptocurrency stealing. We Steal is the name of a commodity cryptocurrency stealer available for sale. It doesn't masquerade its purpose. It says the leading way to make money in 2021. We Steal is a Python-based malware that uses regular expressions to search for strings related to wallet addresses that victims have copied to their clipboard. Talk about pretty low tech, right?
Yeah, pretty low tech. But if people put stuff on their clipboard and leave it there, which seems and clipboards aren't designed like they persist. So if you copy something like I guess on my clipboard right now, if I hit paste, I'm going to see what it comes up. A Windows server key that's been on there all afternoon. So I haven't copied anything else to my clipboard.
Yep. So the ping back is back.
Go ahead, Larry. I mean, I think you and I both picked it.
Yeah, I picked it, but I didn't get a chance to read it. I think it's one of those.
I
I
had
got to
this
flag
one
this
too.
later. So yeah, please. I want to hear about Paul's clapback.
My what now?
So, I mean, basically, what got me on this one is there's a jacked up DLL that uses ICMP for talking back to its control system from Windows 64-bit, which is pretty damn common anymore. 32-bit Windows is becoming much less the case.
Sure.
And I was just hearkening back to, let's say the late 80s, early 90s, well, maybe even later than that. Anyway, when we were doing a lot more, we're starting to do with firewalls, and people were looking at what could they ride on the ICMP protocol because people were allowing ping through their firewalls and corrupting it. And what's old is new again. Here we are back in 2021, and we're doing CNC over ICMP that probably flows right through firewalls.
Oh my God, is that
I think the mistake people were making back in the day is they were allowing all ICMP through the firewall, just
all the variants.
Right, but there were certain types and codes like echo reply, echo response. One is type 0 code 0, one's type 0 code 8, something I don't remember now. But there's certain types and codes that represent echo request, echo reply.
Echo request type 8 code 0.
Yes, type 8 code 0. I had it backwards. And then there's the one that that Trace uses. What is that one?
Oh God.
Yeah, there's a, like, if you send a UDP packet and it sends an ICMP code. Wow, my TCP/IP skills are rusty now. I was totally willfully unprepared for this discussion.
Back in the day when we were talking about this stuff, I remember being in a SANS class taught by Hal Pomerantz, and I don't remember much about the class except I remember two things. One, he had a watch that was tied to the Central Time Services, so he said, my time is more accurate than yours. If you're late, you're late. And two was a guy in the class looking at loading payloads into ICMP packets, and he type 20, he had figured out how to do it.
Yeah, ICMP time exceeded is what Traceroute uses. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so those are the ones that you should explicitly allow if you want that functionality.
Yep.
And of course, if you don't do that and you allow all ICMP, then you allow what we're talking about today is using it as a back channel for communications.
Yep. And Lee, you may have taken another class, Sec 617, where you learned about exploiting Wi-Fi captive portal networks or open Wi-Fi networks.
Yes, we did.
Using ICMP-TX.
Yep.
Which still fucking works
because they allow all ICMP and they don't filter on their types and codes.
If you do if you allow echo request and reply outbound from that network, requires some premeditation. You set up your receiver somewhere that you can ping on the internet, and you can.
Because you can do it over the standard types and codes. Because the payload is kind of irrelevant, right? It's operating system dependent. What the payload is, if I remember correctly.
You're right, and the ICMP specification says the data should be of this length and this type.
Yes,
should, not must.
Should is not must.
Yeah, exactly. So it will be of that length, but you can stuff whatever payload you want in that, and that theirs becomes your tunnel. You just have to have something to receive it that can strip that data back out and reassemble it for you. And
right.
That's
network security is still important.
Yeah. ICMP is still important.
It is. I mean, well, if you want these utilities to work, it's still important. You could just drop all ICMP, but then you're not going to be able to do ping and trace route. So there.
Yeah.
And there's Network Basics 101.
But
a bit rusty from some of us. Still there, though.
If you're practicing defense in depth, you should be able to do pings and ICMP outbound to the internet from only specific locations in your network.
Right. Very
Which
true.
are probably the most valuable ones where this would be great for exfil.
So. Doug, you've let us kind of limp along in this discussion. You know this? Are you still teaching this stuff? You should know this stuff better than we do, I feel like.
We absolutely do. I mean, I just... understanding those kind of packet layouts and how that stuff works I personally just think it's so critical because so many things and so many flaws. I just don't know how you could be a security professional and not study that kind of level of packet design, which is why when we built the program, we built it around networking instead of around programming, not because programming is not important, but because I felt like networking was the more critical aspect of some of this stuff, and we had to just do some kind of trade-off. And
yeah, I mean, you still see fragmentation reassembly attacks today.
Yep.
Absolutely. I mean, I just don't want people graduating who don't know what a teardrop attack is or who couldn't. I mean, I don't spend time teaching people really old stuff because it's not necessarily that exciting. But, if you can't understand ping of death when you read about it, you're not much of a security professional. Maybe you don't know exactly how it works, but when you read about it, you ought to be able to understand it.
Ping of death was the one would blue screen certain Windows operating systems, right?
It blue screened everything because it was a malformed ICMP packet that was basically the data payload field was set to a number bigger than 255. So
that's all it was. Yeah.
That was all it was, and it crashed Cisco. It crashed everything on the earth. It crashed 3Com routers, 3Com hubs. Everything we had crashed when that was running, and it took packet sniffing to figure out what was going on, and it was crazy. So, yeah, I absolutely think that this stuff is critical, and people that are out there listening who have not studied this, I think you should spend some time getting up to speed on TCP, UDP, ICMP, all these protocols, because that is what 12-year-old hackers study. They spend a lot of time studying this stuff, and that's why these kind of attacks develop. Because
or adult hackers that act like 12-year-olds and blue screen people's PCs in the office that were playing games, like my friend Bob did.
Or the really annoying secretary who got the job because never mind. But yeah, I mean, that's wrong.
That was
Pro
Bob.
tip:
It's
sending
all
a ping
Bob.
of death to a coworker's workstation may not work out well for you. Ask me how I know this.
Say that again.
Sending a ping of death to a coworker's workstation may not work out well for you.
Oof.
Especially if it spreads across the whole network and crashes everything in the chain.
Well,
yeah. Don't
Oh,
do
I did
that.
it on the
Always
local
hack with
subnet.
permission, kids. Don't listen to what Bob used to do.
Yeah, don't listen to me. But yeah, I really have a thing about it. I think it's really critical that people learn a lot of this stuff. And I don't insist necessarily that you memorize every last bit and every last packet, but it's like you ought to be able to understand that when you see it and when somebody's talking about it. Otherwise, you're going to be pretty weak.
Agreed.
Yep.
Let's see. I had all kinds of the stories are all over the map. Well, we're on the somewhat on the topic of cybersecurity jobs. There was an article that new hires are speaking out about cybersecurity job expectations, and they discussed the issues in the report, that which skills are needed for which roles, and there are issues with there. So I like this example because I think it underscores some of the issues we have today, that many introductory positions want applicants to hold industry certifications. However, some of them require the CISSP, common certification. Since someone's looking for an entry-level position, they're unlikely to have the requisite 5 years of experience the certification requires. I actually forgot that was a requirement of the CISSP.
It is.
Yep. Now there are definitely ways, quote, around that your sponsor could get you to, they have 5 years of equivalent experience based on these practices. So
I see.
And there's some kind of junior CISSP too that you can get without the work experience.
Correct. But
Right.
when the job requirement says not junior SCISSP,
Well,
says
no, I know,
CISSP,
and I mean we've seen those too, and I mean it's usually I think it was just something that was written by somebody who didn't really know anything about these certs, and they were like, we don't require a cert, so put CISSP on there. I'm like, really? Because I've had students bring that stuff to me, and I'm like, you can't even get this cert. This is ridiculous.
20 years of programming in Rust or Golang, like it didn't exist 20 years ago. Like, I can't possibly.
Wasn't there a job application that the guy who created Go looked at, and it was like so many years of Go, and he only created it like half that time ago?
Yeah, there was a story about that.
Like the creator of Go couldn't get a job programming in Go because he hadn't created it yet.
Right? Yeah. So there's certainly issues there, and I do really believe that modeling the healthcare field serves as some great examples. I don't know if I told you guys this on this show, but I'm talking to my wife about, she works in healthcare, and she just casually mentioned one day, she's like, when you go into the healthcare field and like whatever you're applying for, whether that's a X-ray technician, ultrasound technician, CNA, whatever it is, that you have to take a course in medical terminology. And I'm like, well, that's interesting, because one of the complaints about getting into cybersecurity is no one understands what the heck we're talking about. And so you have to do that, and you have to do a clinical study. So you have to go to a hospital and shadow someone for a couple of days. I'm like, these are all really positive things that we could do in cybersecurity to kind of, drop some of those bars. John Strand also along these lines, had an interesting Twitter post, about how we need to be more accepting of people getting into the field. And doing research for a show I'm trying to build is that I think there's, and I'm not saying that we should still operate this way, right? I think the notion today is that we should be more accepting, and I think model healthcare as to how we get people into the field. But there's a deep, rich history of how hackers were learning their skill and craft and sharing it with others, and only those who were worthy, right? We talked about BBSs. You know, there was a shaming of the newbies or lamers, right, as we used to call them, and that was so deeply rooted in the early days of hacking, especially because there was no formal training for hacking in any shape, form. It was all self-taught, and if you spent all that time teaching yourself,
I'm not going to give that away for free.
Give that away to someone who could potentially do harm with it, by the way.
Or I'm going to have to spend 15 hours explaining what, you know, a buffer overflow is,
right,
or like how TCP/IP works, so that they can understand how this thing works. Like,
right.
There's a barrier to entry.
There was also a lot of access to information was not as ubiquitous as it is today. There wasn't the internet back then,
right?
Certainly, and I think, you know, a lot of those things have changed. And I think healthcare is certainly the model, and certainly we have much better training for folks today as well.
I think that the new hire case, people forget to focus on the person's ability to learn, apply, and stick to getting to the end point, that they don't give up. And there are a lot of ways people develop those skills that may not have anything to do with cyber, but can certainly demonstrate that ability.
Yeah.
Recently, in the gym, I've been talking to a young lady who's been a bodybuilder since she's 17, and what she does in terms of sticking to a goal, thick and thin, in and out. Oh my God, on a project, she'd be awesome. She would not give up. But how do you put bodybuilding on a resume and translate it to that kind of stick-to-itiveness? I have no idea.
You know,
but there's also a thing too. I think one of the things in our culture is that, you know, not everyone needs to be or wants to be the world's most elite hacker, reverse engineer, pen tester. In healthcare, you know, that's the doctor maybe level position, right? In bodybuilding, Lee, right, there's the professional bodybuilder. I mean, a lot of us work out, right? But we're not aspiring to be,
we do,
you know, the top. Maybe some of us don't even work out, right? Maybe you go for a walk a day versus, you know, going to the gym and lifting weights, but versus being a professional bodybuilder, right? And
I mean, I'm all into fitness. I'm all into fitness. This whole hot dog in my mouth.
Yeah. But you know, that doesn't mean
the case of the young lady I was talking about. She actually went to a competition a couple of weeks ago. She sent us pictures in her division. She came in 5th out of 12 in her particular group. The total of 130 in the entire set. But I was like, holy shit!
Right, but that shouldn't preclude someone from working in the fitness industry.
No,
right?
No.
Shouldn't preclude someone from working in healthcare. It shouldn't preclude someone from working in cybersecurity.
No,
we need all kinds of people at all different positions with different skill sets that are accomplishing goals and filling roles in cybersecurity. And yeah, sure, some of us are going to be maybe people who reverse engineer malware, right? And some of us are going to be people who are awesome SOC analysts and CISOs and work on the legal side and work on the compliance side. We need all those people working in cybersecurity. So it's all about having those well-defined roles and allowing people to come in and work in the field. And, you know, like I said, in healthcare, some people want to be the CNA, some people want to be the technician, some people are medical coders, some people are brain surgeons, right? And it's all about, I'm not saying you can be anything you want to be if you put your mind to it, but, you know, there's a career path that I think we need to carve out for people in cybersecurity.
Yeah, and you know, so Lee, you talk about that dedication to something that takes a long time. You know, back in the day, a former employer wanted to promote me to a manager position, but I didn't have my college degree. And they said, "You're so close to getting your college degree, you know, and go back and finish it and get it done. And like that will prove that you went back and you had the chutzpah to go back and go do this thing that took a really long time and was hard to do, especially after this long." So I did it. I went back and I remember I went back and got my degree. And you know, honestly, they're blowing smoke at my ass for that one. But and their argument was that finishing a college degree, you know, was something that you could stick with for 4 years that maybe you didn't like, but you got the job done and you were motivated to get the job done. I don't think that's a really great measure.
reason. Yeah, I don't think it's a great reason to do it, right?
Yeah, I don't.
No.
Well, I mean, I think the measure is great, but I don't think that's the right measurement tool.
Yeah, agreed.
Like,
No,
hey,
no.
you really stuck with it and are now $300,000 in debt. That's not, to me, that's
No,
not a great
no.
measurement tool. But the
It
measurement
shows
is great.
that you could accomplish a hard goal,
Yep.
and that's very good.
Yeah.
Also gives some indication of how well-rounded you are. But at
Yep.
the same time, that can't be the only measure.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think the big one, just goes to prove that you could actually stop doing the wake and bake and go do something and be productive. And
That's crazy talk.
I know. I know. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
I think, everyone's path's going to be different. And I think that Doug's laughing here because he teaches in a degree program.
I'm just being quiet.
For a
I'm
university.
just
He's there, he's
sitting here.
there.
I got my bottle of wine. I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, but I mean, Doug, all right, we won't say Doug. Someone like Doug has have conversations about how you can hack your way into getting the right degrees without incurring a lot of debt to gain the right knowledge and experience to have a career in cybersecurity or in technology, right? It doesn't always.
Yeah.
I think that the 4-year degree is pushed too much across the board, and I think there's lots of different ways to do it. Here in Rhode Island, as an example, you can go to a community college. Is it free for anyone that wants to do it? Like, what are the requirements?
You have to be a
there?
resident.
You have to be a resident. What are the other requirements, Doug? Do you know?
There are some grade requirements and things, I think, around that. But, I mean, generally, if you're a resident of the state, and then a lot of states have this now.
Yeah, a community college.
Generally, if you're a resident of the state, you can go to community college for 2 years, get an associate's degree. And like Paul said, this is now about hacking your education, which I would strongly encourage you to do. And I don't mean doing anything illegal, but you can certainly apply the same principles to getting degrees and things because it's a game, just like anything else. And going to community college for 2 years for free makes an awful lot of sense to me.
Me too.
Then you can transfer. So find the right program. Not to toot my horn, but our program accepts people from CCRI.
Yep. That's the Community College of Rhode Island, and they're very strong in technology.
Oh, they have a great NetTech
Yes.
program, and so we take people that have been in their NetTech program, and we love those people, and those guys saved a whole pile of money, right? Because they didn't start paying from day one,
but it also proved that they like it too, right? Because you're not paying a whole boatload of money to go to a program and find out you don't like it.
Right.
You're going for free. And if you find out you like it, hey, guess what? Great. If you find out you don't like it, you didn't spend a whole lot of money. Because, let's face it, you got to do this stuff to see if you like it.
People have this bad view of community college, and they have tons of cool stuff over there. I mean, every time I ever went over there, I was like, wow. They had a welding program.
Yeah.
They had They had this whole virtual house that you could wire and learn to be an electrician or a plumber. And I mean, those are great skills to learn. Even if you're not planning to get a degree, it's like, wouldn't it be handy to be able to wire a house? That would be kind of cool.
Yep. Yeah. And think about that. Go to the community college 2 years for free and get all of your a good portion of your general education requirements out of the way.
Yeah.
And I'm saying the fluff courses, the quotey fingers, but some of those technical writing and those types of things are all that fluff. But
writing is certainly something that you're going to need for a lot of these fields.
You're going to need an art elective. You're going to need a creative writing elective. You're going to need some math. You're going to need some.
But just hack the thing. Look at the schools you want to go to and see what they require, and find somebody that's got to deal with them, so you can transfer after 2 years and you can get your 4-year degree. And then because you need it. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. In the modern, right or wrong, in the modern age, you need a college degree. You're going to suffer if you don't have one. Maybe not right up front, but you are going to, in the long run, somebody's going to say, "Wow, you don't have a college degree," and then you're going to be limited by it. Because I know many people that have had that. This Larry was just describing his experience with it.
But even a great way too, Doug, is get your associate's degree and then go find a job in that field.
Even better.
And find an employer that's going to help you pay for the rest of it.
No, even better. Even better. Go find an employer that is in another state that has a free community college program that your community college associates will transfer to, so that you can take another 2 years and get your bachelor's degree.
Can you do that?
Well, it actually doesn't work that way.
Well, close. I mean, there's going to be some that isn't going to overlap.
Well, most community colleges can't award 4-year degrees, so the bachelor's degree requires the upper 2 years.
Interesting.
Really? Okay, I didn't realize that.
There's another use case, and this was a case for me. When I went into community college, I was not ready to go to college in terms mentally or prepared. So I spent 4 years in community college, and about somewhere around in year 2.5, I figured out I wanted to go on to a 4-year. I was ready. So then I went through and got the rest of the electives and basics that I needed to come in as a junior. I missed one, but I was pretty good. But I'm sure glad I did that on a very low cost instead of paying for a 4-year to mess around for a few years where I really wasn't ready to be there.
But wait, you were going to do 4 years of community college and get a 4-year degree?
No. I was going to community college for 2 years to get an AA degree, and it took me more because I wasn't ready to be in college. I was not mature enough.
Got it.
I was not ready.
You remind me of the line from Animal House, 7 years of college down the drain.
Hey, now. Careful. Watch it. I'm kidding.
And when I started, it was actually free, but during the course of my being there, they started charging, I don't know, was it $50 or $75 a quarter? It wasn't expensive.
Even today, community college is very, very inexpensive most places, so it's definitely worth exploring, even if your state doesn't have that for free. And like Lee said, a lot of people aren't ready to go to 4-year school. Sometimes for academic reasons, sometimes just for maturity, and it's a challenge when you go from living at home and suddenly you're living on a campus surrounded by bars and clubs and
beautiful people and
then and it may be difficult to focus, and a lot of people aren't quite ready for that, and so community college can give you an opportunity to pursue that kind of thing as well. Plus, if you screw up and you want to change majors, or you don't like the fact that you're majoring in interpretive dance and you really think you should be majoring in art, you can change, and it's so cheap that you didn't really lose a lot in that. Whereas you sign up to go to some really expensive school, and 2 years in you change majors, you got another bunch of years going on, and that's another problem. So I'm a huge fan of the community college system. I mean, just like anything else, community colleges vary in quality and offerings. So, do some research, find out what you want to do, find out which community colleges best serve what you want to do. And I'll probably get fired because I said all this, but I mean, basically I think it's a really good option for a lot of students to do that, and just do some planning, hack your degree, and you'll do well, and you can save a lot of money at the same time.
No, you won't. Tenure. Sorry.
You will. So one of the community colleges up here, I think it's CWI, they have an ad in the local movie theaters, and they show you can learn to fly a helicopter, among other things, while you're there. So I've got some neighborhood boys going there. They're learning computer security and something else very cool.
Yep. So maybe the one that I was thinking about is moving out of state and that type of stuff, and you could probably even do it in state, because Goose was just commenting on similar types of things. Do your first 2 years at a community college and then transfer to a state school where you're a resident, because you will get cheaper prices for being in-state resident for state schools, and some of these state schools are amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And I think what one of the themes here too is that kind of a closing on this topic, and then I'll move on to more stories. But to work in technology and cybersecurity, it's not necessarily like you have to have a degree, right? I mean, to be a doctor and a lawyer, right? You can go get your degree, and if that's what you want to do, that's great. Go get your degree, right? What we're looking for in technology and cybersecurity is, can you demonstrate the knowledge and skills, right? How you acquired those doesn't so much matter. Whether you learn them on your own, whether you went to a community school, or whether you went to an Ivy League school, doesn't really matter. Did you acquire those, those skills? And I mean, that may not apply across the board. Like you're going some hardcore, research kind of, thing that might be different, but I think for the most part, what we're looking for in competent cybersecurity professionals is demonstrate the knowledge.
Yeah. Yep.
Let's see. Changing gears, hundreds of millions of Dell computers are at risk due to multiple BIOS driver privilege escalation flaws. Technical details aside, and this article is chock full of them. If you want to go read through them, I encourage you to do that. But they could basically allow any user, even without privileges, to escalate their privileges and run code in kernel mode. Again, I thought this was kind of different. I thought this was an actual vulnerability in the BIOS, but this is a driver on the system that allows this to happen, so they can use this to gain privileges to run code on unpatched Dell systems, using this to gain local privilege escalation, which is interesting. Also, the attack surface of this vulnerability, the number of computers is staggering. This was documented by Sentinel Labs. Did a great job in the write-up, by the way.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, in laborious technical detail, stepping through all of the debugging. It looks like an IDA Pro screenshot there.
The favorite part I think about this article is these high severity vulnerabilities, which have been present in Dell devices since 2009, which affect hundreds of million devices and millions of users worldwide, similar to a previous vulnerability I disclosed that hid for 12 years. The impact this could have on users and enterprises that fail to patch is far-reaching and significant. 12 years.
Unbelievable.
Dude, you're getting a Dell. It's a singing computer.
I was I went to the Dell advisory and just looking at, the list of affected devices, inspirons, latitudes, scrolling, more latitudes, optiplexes, precisions, Vostros. That's one I hadn't heard.
Yep.
XPS, which actually XPS is one of their better laptop platforms. I almost bought it.
It's on the chip, it's a chip they don't change very often because of firmware driver updates. So it's a chip that's probably been there for years and years and years, and they just keep using.
It's in the Thunderbolt. It's in their Thunderbolt docks.
Yeah,
Dell dock and Dell Thunderbolt docks.
I tried to put the link to it in my comments for my Article 16, the Dell advisory, because I had the Sentinel Labs posting, and it's a disheartening list. It sucks the joy right out of the room.
Right? Yeah, because if you deploy Dell in your enterprise, which a lot of people have,
but nobody does that.
Yeah, you got a lot of updating to do on your systems, and you've got to update what sounds like a pretty low-level driver, which, as we know, in updating things, doesn't always go right. And so when that goes wrong, and these are laptops, and the person's remote, that could really suck.
Mm-hmm. But Paul, if we can move along, that was a pretty one. Lee, you talked about sucking the joy right out of the room. Speaking, in some cases, either being really a happy event or sucking the joy right out of the room. Tell us about Utah County's online marriage system.
So that was kind of a fun story.
Yeah.
Okay. They came up with a virtual system for getting married at the end of 2019, where they could do the whole thing, the license, the witnesses, the justice of the peace, whatever, all online. And they had it pretty much set to go, but really hadn't done anything with it. And then COVID hit, and we're all, working, staying home. And now they've got, in the last 14 months, huge success, because you can you can use their system, go to Utah and get married without having to worry about the fact that you can't be with people, the offices that they needed to do the paperwork are often closed, or you couldn't, these guys got it all in there. They're online. It's just working. I was like, it's kind of a non sequitur from our regular cyber stuff, but I thought, holy crap, talk about smart timing.
I wonder if they had a pen test against that application.
I don't know.
Huh.
Should we phone a friend?
Yeah, maybe.
Is polygamy a thing? Like multiple wives in
Yes.
Utah?
Yes.
It is a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's illegal though.
It's not like legally sanctioned by the state, but
the
And
church.
it's federally illegal.
I know. There's all kinds of law articles about whether it's actually legal in Utah or not.
Hey, they got inmate weddings. That's a tough one. And
Are those recognized by that very state to state as well?
inmate weddings, yeah. International weddings, it's like
international inmate weddings.
it says inmate and international weddings. 23,000 military, inmate, and international weddings.
Wow. Like where do they draw the line? Where do they draw the line between inmate, interstate, and military?
This is a whole different segment.
Could two inmates from different states get married on this site?
Yeah, or two inmates internationally.
But in Utah,
that are both in the military.
You have to be a resident. You have to be a resident of
Utah.
Utah to have it recognized in Utah as a marriage.
Wow.
I don't know. Well, I mean, it doesn't sound like it, because if they did international weddings,
I was guessing that was with a U.S. citizen was marrying someone internationally.
so, I mean, my wife and I got married in New York. We weren't New York residents.
Right.
We just went and
Well,
got
no,
a
you
marriage
don't have to be a
license in New York and got married. Like,
You never heard of anybody
It
eloping
might
to
be a
Las
good
Vegas to
segue
get married?
into reality TV star Josh Duggar. Is this the what was the Duggars? What was that? Was that a?
It was a show about this giant family. They had like, I don't know, like 25 kids or
Kids, yep.
something.
Was he one of the kids? Is
no, he was the father.
Yeah, he was one of the kids.
Oh,
wasn't
was
that? He was one of the kids. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. I've
Well,
never seen the show, but I remember somebody
19
was
kids
watching.
and counting was the. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just about like, yeah, it was.
but and I say that because he was married. Like, was he one of the kids and he was married and still?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I
Or
mean,
was
they
he-
got that many kids. Some of them are like 20 years old, when other ones
Right.
are just
Okay.
born.
Right.
Yep, good point.
But there was something about his wife had porn and he had porn. What was what was the story?
So, I didn't really read into it because it was one of those kind of stories. Allegedly, his wife installed anti-porn software on his computer.
What is anti-porn? Is that like child?
I don't know. My wife hasn't installed it on my computer yet.
Yeah. It's like filtering.
Some filtering stuff.
That's like
so
a
that-
media thing. Anti-porn software. Yeah.
But so he used anti-porn software
What is that?
to get around. It was software to get around the anti-porn software.
Oh, okay. So we used the VPN.
Sounds like something out of a movie.
Yeah. So like
I saw the story. I figured anti-porn software was just like old Net Nanny stuff, and I figured it was
Net Nanny, that's what we're talking about. Remember Net Nanny?
yeah.
Well, you could get around Net Nanny by just putting in the numerical IP address instead of the actual IP address.
Right.
And it couldn't do that math.
It was just a DNS blacklist. That's all it was.
Well, yeah, that's all Net Nanny was it was literally a DNS blacklist, and if it actually did have IPs in it. So, but then if you went and you converted the IP address to a 32-bit number, you could get around it because that is part of the protocol. And
Sounds like you speak from experience, Doug.
we did quite a few cases like that where schools were going like, we don't understand this. We spent all this money on this anti-pornography software,
And the kids are still getting porn.
and the kids are downloading more porn than ever. And I'm like, look, and they're learning hacking tactics too. So there was a good side to this.
So the software that the wife installed was called Covenant Eyes.
Covenant
Utility advertised
Eyes.
being safe, secure, and proven effective at helping members overcome porn addiction.
Dude, you should check that out.
It popped right up on there. Screen
That's what she
accountability.
said.
It says it helps you break the cycle. Quit porn and live your best life. Live porn free with confidence. And they show frustrated looking guys.
Yeah,
in their
because
bedroom.
they've got Covenant installed. I mean, I'd be frustrated too.
Partner up to defeat porn. Life-changing conversations and break bad habits for good.
It says
Say
Duggar
goodnight.
installed additional software that hid his internet usage from Covenant Eyes. Doesn't say what it was.
VPN.
Oh, I think it grabs. It says blurred screenshots are sent over HTTPS and stored using AES 256 encryption. We never send unblurred screenshots. So, I guess I'm trying to find it if it tells how it works.
Oh, but he was caught for child porn.
Yeah,
No,
ultimately, his anti-porn stuff didn't help him because he got nailed for child porn, which the investigators said that was one of the top 5 worst of the worst that he've ever had to examine.
Ugh, that's gross.
So I look at the final sentence that after you're talking about being out on bail and back home with his 6 kids and pregnant wife, who presumably is installing anti-porn software.
Yeah, it's called throw at the fucking computer, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, he'll change, really.
Yep. Nope.
Yeah, nope.
I don't think so either.
Yeah, I'll refrain from commenting on some of that other child porn stuff until after the show in private company.
Yeah, it's gross. We had Chris Hadnaghi on the show also.
Yep.
Yeah. Let's move on.
Theoretically, it blurs out the porn, and then it also shares what you're looking at with an ally.
Dude,
I don't know how that works.
Like that would be like, you know, watching that cable TV porn. Like
Yes.
where you had to,
Yes.
where you tuned into channel 6 and you put the cable box on 47 and like you got the weird, you know, look, there's a boob.
I think that's a boob. Is that
And then even better, I could share it with you.
Right. Right. Oh my God. I'm all set knowing what you guys look at. I don't want to know what you guys look at on the internet.
Doug, start sharing some with him, will you?
Yeah. All set. Thanks. New attacks are slaughtering the Spectre defenses. I thought this article did a good job of actually, you know, one of the other Threat Post articles. What was in the other Threat Post article? There was some weird reference that you guys had in the other Threat Post article that was kind of wonky. What did they say? It was about the ping attack. It was something in the other Threat Post article that was weird. But in this one, this author on Threat Post did a fantastic job, and I posted it in our story because the way they talk about Spectre, I thought they did a great job of kind of breaking it down. Right, processor predicts instructions. It might have executing. It prepares by following the predicted path to pull instructions out of memory. If it stumbles on the wrong path, the technique leaves traces that make private data detectable by hackers. Summarizing Spectre attacks that way is not easy, and did a great job. The new one is a different way. It's the micro-op cache, an on-chip structure that speeds up computing by storing simple commands, allowing the processor to fetch them quickly and early in the speculative execution process. As the team explains in their write-up from the University of Virginia, even though the processor quickly realizes its mistake and does a U-turn to go down the right path, attackers can still get at the data while the processor is heading in the wrong direction. Whoops.
Right.
Great job explaining that, because that's not easy stuff to explain. And like I read that and understood it, which if you've read articles about Spectre, you got to read them a couple times to kind of digest them. So I thought they did a good job. So there's a new attack. And this one, I mean, basically what they also said in the article was, like, this is going to have performance impacts to be able to defend against these attacks.
Because that was the point I was going to make. I also posted that story, but I didn't do the Threat Post one. I did one from IT News in actually Australia. And they made that same comment that, you know, patches to disable the micro-op cache or halt speculative execution on legacy hardware would effectively roll back all these critical performance enhancements we've seen. And this just isn't feasible. That's one of those risk-based decisions on patching Spectre. I seem to remember, I think it was the Spectre patches had the big performance hit. And in the HPC community, they pretty much said, we'll pass. Thank you very much. We need the performance.
Right. I mean, if you run Chrome and Teams on your computer, you need all the performance you can get, and you're throwing these patches right out the window.
Wow.
This attack was pretty esoteric, though. I mean, it was definitely one of those things where I don't think anybody's found a way to operationalize this shit. I might be wrong, but I read a bunch about this the other day because I did a story in the news, and I was reading about it, and it's kind of like that, you know, extracting data from a hard drive with electron microscope kind of stuff. Yeah, it's doable, it's feasible, but you can't really control what data you're getting and how much of it you're getting. You're only getting the fragments of things that came out of private stores. So yeah, it could be part of a key, it could be part of a token, but I wonder how easy it is to get anything significant out of that. I mean, are you just getting like little chunks, which could be a problem, or maybe not? So they said it wasn't being run in the wild, and that even the article I read said, you know, it wasn't something easy to do.
I didn't have a chance to digest the paper that they put out between the two universities. It's about 14 pages. Did you have a chance to look at that, Doug, at all?
I did. I read the paper, and I mean, it just sort of reinforced. You know, I mean, it's a very cool thing that they found, but I think it's not low-hanging fruit. It's not something that everybody's going to be able to exploit. And even if you're able to exploit this side channel attack, causing this thing to fail in some kind of productive way is going to be very, very difficult, because you would have to essentially force the algorithm to select the data you want by mistake and then leave it hanging there so you could get it. And, that's starting to be that many paths kind of thing to get to anything productive. Now, can you proof of concept this and actually extract data? Yes. Can you do it in a productive way? That's the other, there's two pieces of that. So just like the electron microscope thing, which I thought was the best example of that, as a comparison. Could you do it? Yes, absolutely. You need an electron microscope, hard drive platter. Could you do it in a way? Craig Wright was a person who wrote all the papers about this and proved that, you could do it, but your likelihood you were going to get anything useful was really, really low. It was a little bit lower than flipping a coin.
You mean Satoshi?
Yeah, like Bitcoin, Craig Wright?
That Craig Wright?
Craig Wright was one of the people that wrote a bunch of papers about that electron microscope.
Well, yeah,
thing.
he was an accomplished a PhD computer scientist, right?
Yep. Okay, I was just making sure it was the same guy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it was.
I hadn't heard that name in a long time.
Yep. Sorry, Doug.
Well, yeah, because I had written a paper about, I got in a big fight, like one of those, sort of what today would have been a Twitter slap fight kind of thing with one of the grad students of the professor who had written the original stuff about that, because I wrote a paper talking for corporate purposes of wiping drives, just basically wiping them was sufficient for most stuff. And this guy said, well, you've neglected this whole electron microscope thing. And that guy wrote a paper trying to refute what I said. And Craig Wright got involved in it because he said this is stupid, and he bought an electron microscope, and they actually did a bunch of tests on this to show, they were able to get data, but flipping a coin was actually just about as effective. So getting a significant pattern of bits that you could actually reconstruct anything that would be useful was almost impossible. So, it's all about theory and practice. Theory's great, it's fun, but in practice, I'm not totally sure this Spectre thing is got legs in terms of somebody being able to manipulate this. Somebody may, though. I mean, I don't know.
And sometimes what happens too, in my experience in understanding some of this research, is sometimes it's used as a portion of another attack. Right, it's kind of chained with other things. Like the attack is not just this technique, but this technique is used with conjunction some other vulnerability and some other vulnerability, and now it can really
absolutely. And don't get me wrong, I don't want anybody out there thinking I said this was not a real threat. I'm just saying that
by
it's
itself
a very esoteric piece of a threat. And it could be put together with other things. There may be some way to write code that can exploit this thing so that you can pull back keys or all kinds of things out of private space. It's just, but that at this point, it hasn't been fleshed out to that level.
I was just gonna, quick. My story number 15,
and I've got one after that.
A hacker began posting patients' deepest secrets online. I don't know which country this stemmed from. This was a Wired article.
Yes, I had the same one. That was
Finland. It was Finland.
Finland.
Yeah, it was Finland, and like basically this 22-year-old college student that had some mental health issues in his past, and not fault. People have mental health issues. He sought help for his mental health issues. Was going to school, working, on the up and up. Like basically, it's a Snapchat message with like all of his personal details, his name, social security number, the name of the clinic where he'd gotten his mental health treatments, which was Vestamo. It didn't recognize the sender. And basically, they were demanding a ransom and said, if in 24 hours we don't get this ransom, then after that, it's going to be more ransom after 48 hours. And then after that, we're going to publish all of your information. Turns out that this person wasn't alone. I thought this article was great in understanding the human element behind ransomware.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. So this was I read this and I read this morning actually, and it was an interesting story. So was it Vostramo became this huge telehealth presence?
Yes.
For mental health in Finland, and as they started to grow, there were two methods that you could apply for security stamp that you were doing the right thing for security, like PCI, various PCI levels, and they've applied for level B all the time because level A required that you submitted your electronic data to the state state-run collaborative. But the state-run collaborative wouldn't respond to their requests about how the data needed to be formatted and how they were going to isolate mental health data from the patient's regular medical record, which, here in Rhode Island, that's a big deal. Like, those are two distinct records, and never the twain shall meet, because mental health is a different problem than your physical health. So they never responded. So they said, well, then if you can't respond, if we can't comply with it, we'll always comply with Part B. And they kept getting the rubber stamp for the Part B, which was basically folks that are putting it in manila envelopes and file cabinets. Turns out this whole infrastructure was basically built on like unencrypted MySQL databases. And turns out the two admins that were hired to manage all of their network had a former criminal background that they were acquitted of doing bad things, and they wanted to be able to administer the servers from home, so they opened up the firewall rules to the MySQL server, and hackers found that the MySQL server had a really weak password, which was directly connected to the internet.
Also, just like PSA announcement, and when I read this article, one thing jumped out at me. I'm a big fan of Dr. Carl Hart and his research. He spent the better part of 20 years studying the effects of drugs on people.
Yes.
One of the authoritative, I think, people on this I listened to his Joe Rogan interview and read his book, and it was awesome. And this article mentions like using marijuana, LSD, DMT. Also talks about like drinking vodka, his vape pen, and using Xanax at the same time. Like if you listen and read the works of Dr. Carl Hart, mixing is bad. Like just public service for our community. Mixing is really, really bad and can lead certainly to death. In a lot of cases, like don't. This article doesn't call that out, and I just wanted to call that out within the context of this article. Like really bad,
but still. So I mean, somewhere, and then so deepest, darkest secrets being ransomwared off, and they targeted the company, and the company refused to pay. They knew about some issues, and then they got bought. And didn't disclose the issues. So now the purchasing company is basically saying, hey, we paid you $11.7 million and you guys totally effed up. You need to give us our $11.7 million back. And by the way, we still own the company. So yeah, they're looking to recoup their investment. And yeah,
think that'll happen.
I certainly hope so. All of the assets by the former owner are frozen. So
it's in a lot of agreements when companies are bought and sold.
And international stuff here, but so
well, and because I got all kind of wound up when my story 11, which was about what was it?
It was QNAP. Was that the one you wanted to go
Yes. Yes, that was
I didn't watch the video. I was just reading your guys' comments.
So
on it.
Adrian Sanabria posted this to our Slack channel.
About our Signal, our Discord,
one of the ways,
our Teams.
And he was like,
one of our media.
This was a heart-wrenching video that I forced myself to watch, and I'm like, wow, like this video about this guy hit on so many things that we've been talking about in the industry for so long.
Interesting. I didn't watch the video.
So the big deal was this particular YouTube guy was ranting about the problem that he had with his QNAP NAS. And his QNAP NAS was full of MP3s and every picture he's ever taken since college, including the weddings and his wedding and that of his kids, and just oodles and oodles of really data that was really important to him. And it got ransomware. And he was on a rant, basically like, QNAP, you had a responsibility. You knew about this vulnerability. You didn't tell any of us. Like, he's saying, you should have emailed me. Like, how many of us are on those email lists?
Ignore.
Of like, yeah, exactly.
Spam,
and
goes
you,
to bulk
you should have
email.
emailed me to update this device. How many people update their devices? Even when they email and say there's a critical vulnerability. Like, and you should have auto-patched. And what if we auto-patched in the middle of you doing this massive write operation for something that was amazing and it rebooted? And like, this device shouldn't have been vulnerable to begin with.
All software has bugs.
Crickets, yep. This thing should have never been connected to the internet. UPnP was probably on. Like, and your response was awful. Like, we did the right thing. Like, maybe not. And maybe I understand that he's irate at QNAP because he lost all of the stuff, and he went into finding some stuff about, folks had found that you could get your own keys back by not paying and so forth because someone had broken it. He said, but at that point he was already too late. I don't understand why he was already too late about it.
Yeah, the key's key. Yeah.
Yep. And he said that QNAP offered really bad advice. Like they said that if you detect that this ransomware attack is happening because all of a sudden your drives are going to be churning, don't turn it off. Just let it happen.
Whoa.
Wait, what? Yeah, that one I don't necessarily agree with. So the other one was like, this was my storage, and I chose not to have a backup.
Yeah.
Like,
this was my backup, I thought was what he's saying.
No,
it was his backup.
No, it wasn't his backup. That was his storage.
Oh, shit.
And he chose you read the YouTube description, and he says, I chose not to have a backup of my NAS.
Yeah.
Like, admittedly, these are enterprise problems.
Yeah.
For some
I mean,
dude,
we got bit by that. We lost one of our storage.
Did you
Drobo? Yeah, Drobo.
Did you have a backup?
For some of the files, we did not, and it turned out to be not a huge deal.
Yeah, but I mean,
I recovered what I could.
Yeah.
But then after that, we did have better backups.
Yep.
And I think as many of us know that work in technology, we create backups of the backups and periodic snapshots. And look, I mean, USB hard drives are really cheap, and so you get one. And USB-C is really fast, and so you pop it in, you make a backup, before you go to bed, you drag over hundreds, maybe even a terabyte, and you go to sleep, and you wake up the next day, and you safely remove that drive, and you take it, and you put it in a drawer somewhere, and that's your backup.
Yep.
I mean, we all know that as being nerds and technologists and doing this stuff for a long time.
And I think the big one that really, like, I listened to, and I kind of skipped around through the video a little bit, but he apologized for the gratuitous use of the bleeping because he swore through the whole thing because he was so pissed that QNAP had a responsibility for keeping him safe and that he chose not to have a backup. But all of these things, enterprise-wise, like, these were things that we've solved or we've tried to solve, and we've, the problem is that now these enterprise technologies are coming into the home by folks that don't realize that you need to patch your shit.
Right.
You need to keep on track of the stuff that they're sending you for vulnerability issues. Like, this isn't spam. This is important. You need to understand what the importances of these are, and you need to have your own backup plan for your stuff. But the consumer stuff is you plug it in and you do magic things with it, and it's magic. It just works. So, how do we solve this problem going forward for the people that just think this is magic, and not have them rant about all these things that they really should have been doing, even though they're not IT professionals?
Backups of the backups.
Yeah,
that's important.
Yeah, and Adrian pointed out that his point in sharing that was not that he was compromised. He was compromised with features he never wanted and didn't enable in apps they preloaded and he never used. It's the, I don't know. It reminded me of what people that aren't really familiar with IT have chosen to use it are running through. They're not thinking like a cybersecurity professional. Minimum privileges, take out the stuff you don't need.
Yep.
They're thinking, turn it on. It's a toaster.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I didn't want this multimedia feature, so I had it turned off. But the problem was that it wasn't with the multimedia feature that was the problem. It was because your web interface or something sharing was turned on by default or became enabled at some point through UPnP.
Right. I mean, also, you shouldn't just trust. I mean, again, we ran into this here in the studio, like, and it's my fault for not educating, having backups of the backups, with the staff here, but and I don't fault anyone for that, but like, the NAS failed. And you think if you have a NAS that has redundancy built in,
that was another, that was another one of his point. Like,
you've got it, but like, we had in Tyler Robinson worked with me on it because he had done some NAS recovery on this on the Drobo platform in the past. He's like, dude, I've never seen that. I'm like, dude, shit happens. Like, I'll recover what I can recover, and whatever I can, I'm like, it's gone. Thankfully, it was nothing mission critical that we couldn't recreate or whatever, right?
And that was sort of one of the other ones too that he said, like, we buy these devices because it says RAID. That's the backup right there.
No.
Like until you get crypto lockered, and then you get ransomware,
or until it just.
So-
Doug. I mean, I think you were working with me on the NAS problem too. Like, RAID doesn't mean it's not. There's immune to
invaluable.
all kinds of failure, right?
Don't even get me started on that lecture. I've given that lecture so many times that like RAID is protects you from hardware failure. It's not a backup.
Right.
And I mean,
And actually,
it's very
recovery
effective if you have hardware failure. So
Yeah.
a drive blows, RAID saves you.
But also, like from a recovery standpoint, it's harder to recover something that was
Absolutely.
RAID because the data
Yes.
is striped across all the drives. I had to buy special software to be able to put the RAID back together to be able to do the restore and get back what I could get back, right?
And RAID makes things more complicated
Yes.
storage-wise. It makes more complicated, and it doesn't do one little bit of a thing to save you from any sort of software threat or data corruption.
Right.
Because RAID will be more than happy to protect your ransomware encrypted data just the same way it protects your unencrypted data.
Not to mention, a lot of these file system storage companies have their own versions of RAID. Like Drobo has its own version of RAID, so you can mix and match different drive sizes. Where there's a patented technology, I would assume.
Every card, I mean, you can't even usually interchange different cards because even the same RAID level from a different card won't work
because they're implementing even standard.
It's the same
RAID
thing. Like people that think that if they encrypt their data in a partition, it will be protected from ransomware. I'm like, no, it's not. The ransomware will encrypt encryption, and you still can't get to it. You can't get to your encrypted data. But people there's a lot of misconceptions about data storage and
another one. If you do your offline backup like you discussed, Paul, make sure you know where you put it. Right, Tyler?
Yeah.
Right, Tyler? Oh,
oops.
Sorry, he's not here.
So the other thing that it just reminded me of, the other day I was talking to a friend in the gym, and she was having trouble with Skype on her computer, and she'd taken it to, I think it was Staples a few times.
Lee, you talk to lots of friends that are
he makes a lot of friends at the gym.
I mean, he's a good-looking guy. I get it, but
well, actually, I got to attribute my wife to making the relationship. She's the one who says hi to everybody, and
she's
then
the social buyer.
She introduces us, and then we start talking. But what happened is she couldn't get Zoom working, and she took it to him several times, and they finally said, you need to call Zoom. But she's a free Zoom user, and they don't provide support for that. And my point is, there's lots of bad advice out there that consumers don't know is bad advice. I mean, they'll look it up online, and they can't tell what's crap and what's genuine, or they'll talk to their trusted source, and they get bad answers.
I'm gonna throw
it's a hard problem.
I'm gonna throw a bad analogy out there. They can't tell what's CNN and what's Fox News.
It's all propaganda, basically. At this point.
I mean, see, that was like I said, it was a bad analogy. Like they can't.
But to that analogy, a lot of what you read about technology could be propaganda as well.
Yeah,
right?
Not everything you read on the internet. What is it? 87.5% of all the statistics on the internet are made up.
Mm-hmm. Yep. One of the last stories I want to cover: GitHub exploits and malware policy updates.
Oh, this is a huge one. This is a huge one.
Right. And exploits are posted online. They have been since, we talked about the beginning of the BBS days. I mean, that was the beginning of people posting, their exploits, right? And it's always been shared. Certain exploits have been shared with the community in certain forums and certain levels of that, certainly. And, GitHub has become a very popular place to post exploit code. And their existing language, and here's where I think is kind of weird. So their existing language said that active malware and exploits was bad. And they're like, well, that was too broad. So now our intent is to narrow the scope to malware and exploits that are directly supporting unlawful activity. So you can carry a knife, but don't stab people with it. And how do you know if the knife the person's carrying is you're going to stab someone or you're going to use it to open your Amazon packages?
Right. and this is back to Congressman Langevin's comments about dual purpose, dual use technology.
He called this out specifically.
Like he nailed it. Some other ones too is that not only is it related to the code that is hosted on GitHub, it's also in how GitHub is used for C2.
Yes.
Like GitHub can be used for C2. Are you using that as part of an act? Are you using our infrastructure as part of an active attack against some nation state for bad purposes, or are you using it against a customer that you are contractually permitted to do these types of things? And how can they make the distinction?
Right. I mean, my knife analogy is bad in that fact. Like,
what's that?
Unlawful where?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so if I'm posting something on GitHub, they don't actually know where I'm located. So whose set of laws are they using? Yemen or the state of Florida?
Yes. Yeah.
But like one of the benefits of being able to see the exploit are understand how it's written, how it works.
Defend against it.
Maybe we can defend against it. Maybe there's bugs in the exploit that we can use to disable it, because we've seen a history of that in the past. So it's kind of a bad analogy to the knife thing. Like, knife is a pointy, sharp object, right? Very simple. When it comes to exploits, there's a lot more here.
Yeah.
So how do you, like, you know, what could be directly supporting I mean, there are things certainly that are clearly supporting unlawful activity. Like we covered the cryptocurrency stealer called We Steal, which is obviously promoting itself as unlawful activity.
Yep.
So, I mean, there are clear cases, but a lot of the stuff...
But the point being is that now if you post We Steal, that has some potential legitimate use for understanding the mechanism that was used to make that happen. Where was the vulnerability in Discord? And so... the neat thing I think about this particular GitHub problem is that they put their policy on GitHub.
Right.
And it's open for comment by the community. And you can do a pull request.
Yep.
Rewrite it. Yeah. It's open for pull. It's open for comment. So I think the big one that like want to get out of the story is that I encourage our listeners and our viewers to go click the link and comment. Good, bad, ugly, otherwise, but go comment, make your voice heard. If you want to do a pull request, do a pull request. Like, propose the language. Go do it. Take some action.
I think regulating stuff on the internet is hard.
Yeah.
Really is.
There's a great comment.
Really
Regulating the internet is hard. Maybe you shouldn't regulate. Maybe you, yeah. You have an opportunity. We as a community have the opportunity to change the rules and direct the rules. Go do it.
It's really. It's a slippery slope too.
Git clone.
Yeah.
Git clone. Make your changes. Git add the file name. Git commit. Git push. Right.
I guess my whole thing is
or
like
Git pull. Right?
It's going to get posted somewhere on the internet where people can find it.
Yeah.
I don't care whether it's Pastebin, ExploitDB. Like, there's a million ways now to share stuff on the internet. So, I mean, GitHub, I think, is just convenient for people to do that.
Mega.nz.
Oh, my God. I mean, we could create a huge list of ways you could share.
Or we could just create our own. Wait.
Whatever
happened. Yeah. Or you could, stand up a server in an underground bunker somewhere in another country.
Yeah, let's just do it on AWS.
Outside of, jurisdiction.
Just do it on AWS. Yeah.
Yemen.
There's like there's a million ways
so we're going to stand up in Jamaica, Yemen.
Is
Jamaica's
Port
probably
70
a little
open
more
through the firewall?
fun.
Do you remember what runs on Port 70?
No.
Gopher.
A port stumper? Oh my God. No, I can't believe I don't know what that is.
UUCP?
It's like it's as common as hen's teeth there, Doug. It used to be a thing, but it's been 30 something years.
What? So all right. So Lee, what port did Wide Area Information Search run on?
Oh God,
WAIS port stumper.
Oh Waze. Oh God, I used to run a Waze server too. It was 80 something.
Oh, it's quote of the day.
I remember Waze.
I got to look it up, but damn it, I ran a Waze server, this is killing me, Doug.
No, Port 17 is quote of the day.
No, he said 70.
Oh, he said 70? I thought he said 17.
70 was Gopher.
70 was Gopher. 17 was Waze,
quote of the
right?
day. No, quote of the day.
17 is quote of the day. So if you hit that port, it would give you back a message.
Wide Area Information Search. What port was that?
I don't remember.
Me either. That's why I asked.
Oh.
But I just want to throw that one of those obscure, Gopher era.
There's
calls.
someone out there like going for the walk,
Gopher.
listening to the show, screaming out a port number now for everyone to hear.
Yep.
Gopher.
Oh, I'm sure they are. I can't freaking remember what port it was on, and I know I ran the damn service. I also ran a Gopher server.
Cool.
It's,
Gopher.
oh, no, it's not. No. 210? No way. Port 210.
We'll go with that, Port 210. Someday we'll have a quiz or game show.
And nobody told me there was going to be a test tonight.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other news stories you want to, or are we...
I think we're good.
Exhausted the news for this week. Well, thank you guys.
Got it.
Thank you everyone for listening and watching this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. Larry, take us out.
Over and out.